be struggling today because I'm dealing with a cold. But anyway, so far I feel like Alec Baldwin because it's just me. But it's not a big deal. We'll get through this. Essentially, what I'm doing today is just trying to stay consistent because eventually I'm trying to do this every Saturday because Tony and Jimmy have brought back the early watch, which is hosted here on my Discord, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So, in the meantime, I'm going to try to get through today as best as possible. I've already hopped up on my Dayquils and trying to keep my sinuses from plugging up. And this might be a short one today just because most of my typical panel have stuff to do today. But the show must go on, right? So we'll keep this one short and simple, just for the sake of consistency, and try to keep my dog from barking too much. Anyway, so let's get into the week in review, shall we? A couple days ago, there was a story that broke that 48 U.S. senators had instructed the ATF to withdraw the brace ban, which is good news because the comment period is going fairly well. And if you haven't done so already, you should definitely maybe go to the Truth About Guns or GOA or any one of those grassroots organizations who have the form letters prepared for you, and you can modify them or just use them as they are. Try to keep it civil, non-vulgar, obviously, because in the event that they actually do bother to read the content, you don't want to piss them off, right? So generally with these comment periods, what they actually do is they just collate all the information, and then uh, they just basically say, oh wow, we've actually gotten X number of comments in this amount of time. So they don't have time to read all of them, but they just want to see how many they get, and then they generally react to that. So anyway, there's that. I have an issue with the idea of we're going to set a rule and we're gonna define legalities, but if you pay $200 and wait 6 to 8 months, then you're legal. That's extortion, is what that is. That is almost the definition of extortion. It's okay as long as you pay us. That's not how rights work. That's not how the Bill of Rights works. That's not how the Second Amendment works. That's not how any of it works. Um, but what are you going to do? I mean, generations past have allowed this. There have been administrations that have pushed this and allowed this. So most people just say it is what it is. And then there's people like us who say it shouldn't be that way. Flip the table over and call it out for what it is. It's extortion. And I think one of the big things is the Supreme Court is terrified right now because what they're doing is they're beating around the edges of Second Amendment cases. They're not taking them head on because I think they're terrified to admit that every single gun control law, act, bill, stipulation, things like the NFA, the GCA, and the Hughes Amendment, they would have to rule by definition that every single one of those things is a direct infringement on the law abiding citizen, which would probably force them to abolish all of it. Because I've said this in our daily chats. If you look above my name here on the list on the server, we have the lobby for working stiffs, which is something we do every day on the weekdays, generally between the hours of about 10 to 5 Central Standard Time. Not to say that you can't join in any time in the day or night you want, because people from different time zones sometimes want to chat. So you have guys out from the Pacific Coast that want to jump in long after I'm in bed, but if you want to jump in and chat, feel free to do so. It's just generally the busiest times are somewhere between 10 and 5 Central. Anyway, the whole point of that was we talked about these extortionary infringements before, and the fact of the matter is you can pass 1,000 new laws, and The law-abiding system is, or sorry, the law-abiding citizen is going to generally abide by them, but it's not solving the problem with committing crimes. I mean, the criminal will just ignore the next 1,000 laws you write. So what's the point of putting them on there? I mean, you're just generally adding them in there to tack on more offenses to a criminal that's already breaking the law. So the whole point of it is, hang on a second. I'm working on the volume. I wasn't sure, so I turned it slightly lower because sometimes I come in too loud. Good? Okay. So, anyway, past 1,000 laws, they'll just break 1,000 more. Law abiding citizens will always attempt to be law abiding citizens as long as they don't feel like it's inconveniencing them wrongly just because you've decided to move the goalpost one day over the other. The pistol braces are okay one day, and then 2 years from now, or like currently right now, they're just like, that's not so okay anymore. And it's like, what changed? The materials haven't changed, the design hasn't changed, the lethality doesn't change. Like the firearm is a tool, and the operator is the weapon. Like the gun doesn't kill. A killer instinct and a determined individual kills. The tool doesn't do it. It's an inanimate object. It just sits there. Just like your car. We talk about firearms kill people and it's dangerous or whatever, but then you turn around and hop into your 4,000-pound fueled missile every day without a thought, and you just go about your day. And people always try to compare the licensing for a privilege against a licensing for a constitutional right, and that's where they branch off, and that's where they differ. Driving on public roads is a privilege, so they have put things in place to make you learn how to master that. And the only reason that it works, the only reason any law works, is because society has agreed that this is okay, and they all accept it and try to abide by it. The majority, not the outliers. So I don't like the fact that you can move the goalpost at any time. It just doesn't. If you're gonna make a law, keep the law. If it's a just law, then society will accept it. If it's an unjust law, obviously, you will have people who push it because they want control. You will have people who resist because they see that it's an infringement on their rights. Especially if it was something that was perfectly okay the day before. They're going to say, what the hell? Nothing changed. Except yesterday was Friday, today is Saturday. This firearm is still in the same place I left it yesterday, and now all of a sudden you want to make me a felon. That doesn't make any sense. Find me anything else in nature that happens in. You just won't find it. So anyway, that's the first point I wanted to get across. Scott, you can jump in if you want. That's an open channel. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. And I think it's positive that nearly half the Senate has decided to say enough is enough. The nation's got enough problems. Don't try to criminalize normal people. We've got enough non-normal people to deal with. And we've got enough invaders at the border to deal with, for God's sakes. So anyway, okay, so let's get into that, I guess. So I left a note here. I call her Vice President Knee Pads. But anyway, Kamala Harris finally visited the border after 93 days of being appointed the border czar. And what does she do? She goes to the wrong city. She goes to El Paso, Texas. She goes to a safe haven for liberalism. She goes to Beto country. And let me tell you, in a world of cancel culture, and in a world of liberal outrage, in a world of people who call you out for cultural appropriation, how the hell are you going to let a fourth generation Irish immigrant appropriate a Hispanic nickname? There's nothing Latino about Francis O'Rourke. Nothing. Dude's practically a ginger. Anyway. So what purpose did it actually serve for her to go to El Paso? She arrives, she gets off her plane, the cameras are literally right there on the tarmac. She stands there, and essentially she is bombarded by the press, chief among which one who starts the question and answer session with, "Where the hell have you been?" And she gets mad and she starts attacking the press. And she's like, "I've been here. I've been to the border." And it's like, "No, you haven't. You've been to Los Angeles 3 times since you've become vice president. You've not been to the border. You went to Guatemala and you got your shit pushed in, essentially. You were a public embarrassment in Guatemala, just like the president of the United States was a public embarrassment at the G7. If you want to see what a world leader is supposed to look no further than what Vladimir Putin did after the G7 meeting. His press conference, his answers to the press, his command and control of the situation. That's what a leader's supposed to look like. Which sort of leads me into my third point. A building, I think it's a 12 or 13 story condo, decided that it just wanted to fall down at 2 in the morning in Miami. And the early hours after, on the news, on I think it was Thursday, said that there were 9 people missing, and they rescued 13, 11 were treated on scene and released, 2 were at the hospital in critical condition. I thought, that seems awfully low. And then by lunchtime, a couple hours later, the missing number went up to 50. And then by the time I got off of work, it was 99. And then by the time Friday morning rolled around, it was 149 or 150 people missing. And I thought, okay, that sounds more like the number of residents in a condo where 1/3 of the total number of residences had collapsed. So this was also happening on the day that the president was going to, quote, declare war on the guns. And he did it in a very cryptic and vague way, where he said that he was going to go after rogue firearms dealers. What the hell is a rogue firearms dealer? Because if any of you have ever applied for an FFL or a CNR license or an FFL 07, which is like the king of FFLs, right? For SOTs. You know that there's no rogue anything. They know everything they need to know about you to sign up for one of those things. They have your fingerprints. They've done extensive background checks. In some places, you've had to be interviewed by your local sheriff's department and all sorts of, just there's a bunch of loops to jump through before you can get in there. So what the hell is a rogue firearms dealer? Like, if anybody knows, I'd love to hear it, because I don't understand how that's a thing. Thankfully, well, not thankfully, let me start over. Coincidentally, this building collapse in Miami happened the morning before he was going to do this. And in the chat that we had on Thursday, the one thing that I was driving home, the point that I was trying to drive home is, what happened in Miami is on the same level as a natural disaster, like a tornado ripping through an area in the Midwest, and it destroys hundreds of homes and knocks out power, and people are hurt and whatever. FEMA's rushing out there to help, right? You would think that the commander-in-chief, being notified of this first thing in the morning, Mr. President, a large condominium has collapsed in Miami. There's a lot of people hurt. There's a lot of people missing. We don't have a lot of details. You would think that the optics of the day would insist that the president would go to Miami and speak publicly Now, you know that he doesn't have the power to do anything about the situation, but that's not why you're there. What you're there for is, I'm the President of the United States. This is a tragedy in our nation, and I just want to be here to say I'm here for you, and the full assistance of the federal government is here for all the first responders and the heroes that are out there trying to find people that may be trapped in the rubble. That's what a leader does. What did he do? Nothing. He didn't speak about his war on guns. Cool. He didn't show up in Miami. Not cool. Do you know who did show up in Miami? Do you know who spent the entire day and looked like he had run a marathon barefoot in 100-degree weather? Like exhausted? The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He was there from like 10 a.m. until I was getting ready to go to bed that same day. Like his face was plastered on the camera the entire time. And he had first responders, he had like the police chief, he had like the fire chief. Like he just had people in a conga line up there trying to constantly feed information and updates to people who have family that may have lived in that building, who are watching all over the country going, oh my God, is my wife or is my daughter or is my uncle or whatever in there? That's what leadership looks like. Anyway, he wasn't there. And Friday, still no war on guns. As of this morning, still no war on guns. So, at least it kept him from opening his mouth and inserting foot. But he still didn't show up. So, what a dick. Alright, so that's what? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so, I've got 3 more for you. Derek Chauvin was in the news yesterday. And his sentence was handed down to him for the wrongful death of George Floyd. I'm not going to say it's murder, wrongful death. The speculators out there said that the judge was probably going to hand down a sentence somewhere between 20 to 25 years, and he had split the difference, 22 and a half years. I'm not saying this guy's not guilty. I also am not saying this guy is solely guilty either. Because somebody stood there and filmed the entire situation. There were people in public screaming at this guy and the other officers on the scene. And look no further than Portland to see what a mob of people can do when they're highly motivated against something they actually believe in. And I think the entire people of Minneapolis that were on scene are equally as guilty for the death of George Floyd. There, I said it. I'll fight you over it. Because if you're looking at a guy who's in respiratory distress, which is a very common symptom of fentanyl overdose, and you see an officer who's quite heavy with full gear on, leaning down on somebody, and that guy is detained. Like, he's not going anywhere. You don't have to sit on him, first of all. But if you really think the guy's in trouble, say something, right? Like, cops are there to enforce the law. I get that. But sometimes cops over-enforce the law, and it's like, you can intervene. And even if you're detained by the other officers, if the other officers, including Chauvin, get up to detain you, they would pick up George Floyd, throw him in the back of the car, and come after you, right? You can have your day in court. And when the judge is like, why did you intervene? Why did you start throwing tennis balls or water bottles at the officers? And you'd say, this guy was laying on this dude's neck. The guy was barely conscious. He needed to be rolled over because he can't breathe, according to him. And I wanted him just to get off the guy. And maybe he'd have been alive today or whatever. But we know the outcome. And now this guy's going to spend 22 years in jail. I don't think he's going to spend all 22 years in jail. I think there's an appeal to be had. I think there's a reduced sentence that's going to be handed down because of it. Because at the end of the day, this guy was following his training. This is what they told him to do. This is what they said, this is how you handle this situation. and you use your discretion on how long you want to handle that situation in that way. Maybe it was a bad judgment call, but this is maybe a failure of training in general. But I'm not a cop and I wasn't there, so I'm not going to judge it either way. All I'm saying is if I was the guy with my phone videoing this shit, I'd be grabbing whatever I can get my hands on and like just chucking it at him. I'm like, yo, get off that dude. You've already got him. He's not getting away. If you really are worried about this guy getting away, shackle his ankles, you moron. It's in your field kit in the trunk of your cruiser. Anyway, at least the city didn't burn, right? It's like, isn't it funny when a mob gets their way, cities don't burn? Oh, wait, no, sorry, they still do. Because if you win like the NBA Finals in LA, your fans still riot, don't they? Whatever. Speaking of basketball and fans, Jalen Rose has basically opened mouth and inserted foot. And as much as I used to like the guy, I have to admit, he's lost a fan. Like, I'm not going to watch that guy anymore. That man is human garbage. So essentially,
What are we talking about?
I'm talking about the news of the week. So anyway, Jalen Rose basically goes on air and he comments about Team USA basketball for the Tokyo Olympics coming up and how Kevin Love, who currently plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers, was selected for the team. Now, he raises a good point. Kevin Love had a very poor year this year, statistically. He did not have a good year. His team did not have a good season. There were other players who qualified better statistically than Kevin Love. But Team USA basketball selected him anyway. I believe he is the only white player on the roster to be selected. Jalen Rose decided to make a point of this. He pointed out the statistics. He pointed out, a bad year for Kevin Love on basketball. I agree with that. What I don't agree with is the fact that he said this is tokenism and America is cowardly for not sending an all-black team to the Olympics. Now, I'm sorry. I understand that black athletes dominate in the NBA and in the NFL and just in a lot of sports, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. You represent the country. I I don't understand why broadcasters feel the need to think that race represents the country. Why don't you just have the player represent the country? Like, this is only a problem because we are a nation that's non-homogenous. Like, in Germany, you would have German players, right? And most of those German players are white people. But they have diversity there because if you ever look at the German national football team, soccer football, proper football, uh, they do have black players because there are black Germans. If you go to England, same story. If you go to France, same story. So it's like they get it. They're representing their nation. They don't care about race on their team. They want the best person on it. Now, Rose could say what he can say about the statistics, and I would agree with him. But when he starts talking about tokenism, I'm just hearing liberalism. So my response to him directly on his social media was, listen, you can call it affirmative action or you can call it tokenism. But as a libtard, you are only allowed to choose one or the other. You can't have both. Because if affirmative action works in your favor, you will call it that. But if it doesn't, now you're going to call it tokenism. Go to hell. Fuck ESPN. Fuck you for having him on air. Take his ass off, because that's bullshit. So, my last bit of news for the week, to round out the week, before my voice goes out, because I'm fighting a cold. I should tell you how I got that, but I'll do the news first. So far, statistically, or so far the numbers that came in was 3 people were killed by a knife attack in Germany. Then the story changed to several people because they weren't sure. But then it went back to 3. Whatever. The guy with the knife was put down. Imagine this, by a firearm. Shocker, right? So the question has to be asked. In Germany, where they have ridiculously strict gun control, do we need background checks? Do we need stricter knife control for cutlery? Do we have to have waiting periods to go to IKEA and buy a kitchen set? Do we have to lock up axes and machetes at the Home Depot? What do you think? Because you took away the guns and they went to blades. You're going to take away the blades, and if London, England taught us anything, they're just going to use vans. Or acid in Paris. So what are they going to do next? Are they going to ask for background checks for dildos? Stricter dildo control? Because what if you filled one of those up with buckshot to make it really heavy and tie a string around it and like whip it like a flail and you snap somebody's neck with it? Are they going to start calling for dildo control? Pretty sure a couple of feminists out there are going to take offense to that. They're going to be like, you can't do that. That's not fair. So I think the point is whatever you think you're doing in Germany to restrict violence, taking the tools away is not going to solve that. And I think what you'll discover is here in the good old US of A, despite the fact that the news here has, I think it's the 7th lowest confidence rating in the news for a nation in the world. We're the 7th from the bottom in terms of our people trusting our news. Okay? We're way down there. Shit. I brain farted. Anyway. Give me a sec. Sorry. I brain farted. Anyway. It's my meds. The whole point is you can't trust your news, so they're going to tell you, oh, I remember now. They're going to tell you that there's crime on the rise in all these cities across the country. And I think Portland was 533% increase in like gun violence and homicides. And then like Detroit, Chicago, all the typical cities that have one thing in common. They're all Democratic run cities. They're all in states that don't have constitutional carry. 21 states in this country decided that since the federal government can't get it right, they're going to take control, they're going to take the law into their own hands on a state level. And Texas recently became the 21st constitutional carry state, which I think is fantastic because year over year, if you look at the crime statistics in states with constitutional carry, after it's been passed, the crime has trended downwards. It's just a fact. And that leads me to the point that I was trying to get across to anyone who talks about gun control and stopping crime. If you want to actually do good and you want to stop crime and you want what Joe Biden calls public intervention to stop gun crime, that sounds good, right? The words public intervention to stop gun crime. By definition, that sounds good. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a pro-Second Amendment stance. The fact of the matter is most people who decide to do an armed robbery are desperate for something. They're either desperate for attention, or they're desperate for a feeling of control, or most likely, they're broke, and they're desperate to pay off a debt or somebody that they owe, especially if they owe somebody who's threatening their life. So they're backed into a corner, and they decide to do something radical, like, I'm going to use a Whataburger because I'm a Texan. Let's say Johnny Q douchebag wants to knock over a Whataburger at 1 in the morning. And he walks in and he's got his high point problem solver in his baggy jeans that are barely attached to his thighs. And he looks around the Whataburger at 1 in the morning, and there's 10 people in there. First of all, there's 10 people. So he's like, well, hell, this is going to be a little harder than I thought. I might have to be aggressive. Second thing he notices is out of the 10 people, the 4 standing in line, 3 of them have a holstered weapon. Suddenly, Johnny Q douchebag is like, $50 out of that register is not worth the amount of lead that it's going to be physically inserted into my body if I try this. And he's going to turn around, and he's going to walk out that door. He's going to get back in his car, stolen or not, and he's going to think for a second, what the hell am I doing? And that one situation could change that person's life. If you want to stop crime, you stop the very first instance of that person ever committing that crime. That is what public intervention against gun violence looks like. You carry, as a law-abiding citizen, because it's your right, in a public place, open or concealed, however you want to do it. And a criminal's going to walk in, he's going to see that. And if it's just one person, he might go, I could take that guy. But if it's 10 people, he's going to be like, this is suicidal, and walk out the door. He'll pick another place. He'll go find a gun-free zone. But guess what? Maybe there ain't any in a constitutional carry state. So maybe that guy's going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to work a street corner and suck dick for $20 a pop. Because that won't get him killed. So the whole point is if you stop the first instance of the crime, they don't learn from their mistakes because they were nervous the first time. They don't refine their tactics. They don't gain confidence. They don't become more aggressive because by the third or fourth robbery, they may have to become so aggressive that they kill somebody. That is actually how you stop crime. You stop it before it starts. And the way you stop it is you give them a public display of resistance to being a victim. That's how you stop crime. And the way you sell that to your elected leaders is simple. You simply say, hey, you've had nearly 90 years of trying to do it your way. And it doesn't work. So maybe it's time you start doing it our way. And our way, even if you wanted to compromise, our way is simple. Give us 10 years. 10 years, no NFA, no Gun Control Act, no Hughes Amendment, 50 state constitutional carry. All 50 states. Watch the crime statistics for 10 years. If it trends downward, you lose. If it trends upward, you can sunset it. But I guarantee you they will never have the balls to take that challenge. We gave you 90. Give us 10. Give us 10 years. And I guarantee you a police officer's life is about to become a whole lot easier. Because he doesn't have to go to like 50 calls a day anymore. Because there's only going to be 2 calls a day by an absolute lunatic. The other 48 people are going to walk into a store and be like, I ain't going in there. That dude's going to fill me in if I try to rob this place. You're going to stop crime in a heartbeat before it even starts. I'll bet on it. So anyway, that was the news of the week. I really don't have a whole lot after that. I tried to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. I didn't even think it was going to take half an hour, to be honest. Now that I have panelists, I can fix the panel view. There we go. So now we're all equal. So good morning, Scott. Good morning, Buretto Sensei.
Morning.
Tell us about the world from Korea, if you could. If you're still awake. I know it's really late for you. I will have you know that I am sort of interested in a Daewoo K2, or I think it's called a DR200 or a DR300 here in the States. Unfortunately, they've gotten really expensive in the last like 6 or 7 years. Holy crap. When they first got here, they were $600. Now they're $1,600 to $2,600. Of course, shortages. Because COVID. Whatever, right?
I'm headed down south because Fifi is in town.
Who's Fifi?
Not who.
Huh?
What?
Oh, what is Fifi?
Fifi would be a B-29 Super Fortress.
Oh, I know Fifi. I absolutely know Fifi. For those of you who don't know, I'll try to get this in view. Yeah. All right. How am I going to do this? Oh, I know how to do this. Sorry. I'm a little out of practice, that's all. This is Fifi. Fifi is beautiful. Fifi has 4 double wasp major engines, and they all work. Sorry. My grandfather actually flew, or not my grandfather, sorry, my uncle. He actually flew for the 456th, and his war ended before he got to fly a B-29. He actually flew 17s and 24s. And he actually did he was part of the Pwnery raids that failed miserably the first time. He's one of the few survivors of it, actually. But yeah, Fifi's awesome.
They also have a B-24 Liberator.
That's what he flew. And he never really liked it. He said that he was one of those people who used to use the cliche that a B-24 is nothing more than a box that a B-17 ships in. Now, granted, they built more 24s. They flew longer, farther, higher, and with a bigger bomb load than 17s. But for some reason, most pilots preferred the 17's durability because the wing loading on 24s was so great and they were so thin profiled that German 30 millimeter cannons would break the wings and they weren't as reliable in terms of battle damage.
Yeah, you're always going to favor the one that's going to get you back at the end of the day.
Yeah, like you might fly a little lower, a little slower, but your bombs will probably hit the target because you still got that brilliant Norden bomb sight and you will probably still make it home in most cases. Double Wasp Major engines midnight. Double Wasp Major. Actually, I got to meet. I used to play in one of those volunteer big bands when I was a baritone player and a trombone player, and we used to go to like what do they call those?
Competitions?
No, no, no. It was like we used to go to like the shit. Sorry, these my cold medicine makes me addle brained. We used to go to like these shit. What do they call them? It's like a club for veterans, basically. They're all over the country.
VFW?
Thank you. Yes, we used to go to VFWs and we used to play big band music all the time. And I ran into a guy there, and he was a mechanic at the time, and he used to tell me that he hated the B-29. He was like, that thing is a mechanical asshole. And I'm like, why is it so terrible? And he goes, you changed the spark plugs on that monster. Because if I remember right, doing the service on a B-29 was removing 156 spark plugs. And it took all night, and they had to have that plane on the flight line by 4 a.m. So when a B-29 came back in, first thing they had to do was land it without wrecking it. Then they had to inspect it for battle damage. And then they had to make emergency repairs because they might have to turn around and go right back out the next morning. And one of the first things that they would have to do is take the nacelle covers off, and they'd have to change the spark plugs in them because those things were prone to fouling constantly. And this guy would tell me these horror stories about how the plane would come in after, I think it was a 13 or 14-hour flight mission, come back, it'd have to cool down, they would have to go over the whole thing with a fine-tooth comb. The nacelles were the first things to come off. As soon as it hit the ground, they took the covers off because that engine had to take forever to cool down. And then they had to start ripping plugs out of it because it took all night. He was like, fuck that. So, cool as a plane as it is, he described everything that I've ever heard of in rumors. The plug changes were a bitch. The takeoff procedure was a total pain in the ass. It required a much higher takeoff speed than a 17 and a 24. So inexperienced pilots wrecked these things constantly. And the engines were prone to catching fire. So I think the weirdest part is this. I think this was the first bomber that the U.S. used where the pilot was not in control of the throttles. So if you've ever seen a good example is Jimmy Stewart's Strategic Air Command, which was basically an hour and 40 minutes of B-36 peacemaker porn. But Stewart flew B-29s before he flew the 36 in the movie, and he was talking about how the flight engineer, he would have to call out the flight engineer for the throttle. And the flight engineer sat behind the pilot and the co-pilot. And he had control of the throttles because he had an entire bank of gauges in front of him. Like the pilot on a B-29 had very, very simple gauges. He had an altimeter, he had a speed, he had a flap indicator, he had an attitude gauge, he had a compass, and he had, I can't remember the name of it now, but he had the autopilot controls too. And that was it. Because up front, it was all glass, plexiglass. And the Bombardier was literally just in front of his feet, essentially below him and in front of his feet. So, like, everything for the pilot was just pay attention to what's going on in front of you. The engineer, on the other hand, that poor bastard sat in front of something that looked like the operator's switchboard in the 1940s. He had pyrometers, he had fuel gauges, he had, what do they call it? I think it was called thrust gauges or torque gauges. He had the RPM gauges. He had all the throttle controls. He had the mixture controls. I think they were automatic propeller pitch adjusters. The propellers pitched automatically, so you didn't have to worry about that. But his gauges were just a wall of just glass. So like that poor bastard got it the worst. But anyway, yeah, this guy he went on for. I found it fascinating because I only knew 17s and 24s from my dad and my uncle, and then this guy was telling me about 29s. So the fact that you get to go see Fifi is pretty awesome.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I got to go see, it was a B-17 and a B-24.
Mm-hmm.
And the B-24 did not seem very large at all.
Next to a 17, it does. The wings are way longer and thinner. And the other thing is I think part of a 24 that makes it look smaller than it is the way that the landing gear is set up. It's a belly lander. It's like it's real low to the ground compared to a 17 that's got these long landing gear coming off the wings.
Oh, it's not a tail dragger.
Right. It's a tricycle. But it's also real low to the ground because of it. Matter of fact, if I remember right, see on a 17, the turret, the ball turret, it was where it was and that's it. And then you would have to point it straight down to get the hatch open to get in and out of it. On a 24, you would get in the ball in the cockpit, in the cabin, and then the ball would retract downward. Because when it landed, the ball would be, if the ball was down there, it would have been crushed. So it was actually a retractable ball turret.
No, it wasn't a B-24 when I was a kid. It was a B-25 rather, Mitchell.
Oh, those are small. You know what's really
Yeah,
funny?
I've seen
People
even when I was a kid.
people talk about the Mitchell and how old it is, right? You and I are the right age for this. But when I was a little kid, probably about 4 or 5, my folks took me to Ellington Air Force Base in the south of Houston because they had to go get their military IDs renewed. And on the runway, while it was still an active base at the time, I saw a B-25 and it was still in service. Like I
Hmm.
saw it it did a touch and go. We were driving through the parking lot. I saw this thing land, taxi, turn around and take off again in my lifetime.
Maybe
And I'm like, that is
maybe
so
they were
cool.
using it as a camera platform or something.
It could have been. It didn't have any guns on it, but it was still painted in its correct like paint scheme. It still had its correct paint on it. But yeah, it
Yep.
did a touch and go. And I thought at the time I didn't know what it was. I just saw it and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And my dad's like, "Oh yeah, that's a B-25." And then later on I asked him, I was like, "Why did it do that landing and take off?" He's like, "Oh, that's called a touch and go." So, like I was a kid at the time, so I didn't know. I just saw awesome old plane made a lot of noise because that had Wasp engines too, Pratt and Whitney Wasp engines. Didn't have the double Wasp major, but that thing was huge. Yeah, if you want B-25 porn, you can watch 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, which, if I remember right, that's Van Johnson.
Yeah.
And later on, you can just watch the 2001 version of Pearl Harbor. Like, visually, those scenes in Pearl Harbor with the B-25s, I found fascinating. I loved it. Like, I think they could have pulled that movie off without a sappy love story. The whole hour battle scene did it for me. Like I love war movies because I call it special effects porn, especially if you can convince me that that's probably what it would have looked like. You know, like not so over the top that you would say, "Nah, that's CGI." Like if it's practical looking, I'm all for it. But the best part about these old war movies, like I started collecting war movies since I was probably 20, and in the last like 5 years or so, I was collecting war movies from the 30s through the 60s. And the best part is like 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and like all these type of Tokyo World War II movies, they all use the same war footage, even up until 2001's Pearl Harbor. I was like, what the hell? It's all the same because that's all they had. But it's great because they did it, you know?
The ship essing to avoid being dive bombed, man. That's been in every World War II movie ever.
Yep. What's up, Tony?
Hey, much.
Well, you missed all the news, and you missed my rant about the ATF, and you missed my rant about Jalen Rose.
The AFT.
Huh?
The AFT.
Yeah. And you missed my rant about the Germans. Actually, no, it wasn't really a rant about the Germans. It was more a rant about gun control, but I think I pretty much covered all the bases. I did have a pretty good rant about Derek Chauvin's trial, too, but. Oh, that's what I left out. I even wrote it down and I didn't even say it. I want to add one thing about the Chauvin trial. I'm fine with wrongful death. I'm fine with possibly second degree murder. I'm not fine with the length of sentence given the guy's history of service, but then again, he also has a history of conflict, so whatever. Like, I'm not the judge, I'm not the
Sitting
jury.
tough.
I don't have to like it, but I don't fully agree with it. I think he should be punished for something. I just don't know if 22 and a half years is fair. But
It's not.
that being aside, if you are in Minnesota and you have to go to trial and your name is Kyle Rittenhouse, brother, do yourself a favor and find an exit visa and get the hell out of Dodge. Like, go to Norway. Like, get the hell out of the country because you will not get a fair trial in that state.
What the fuck,
That is a
Glade?
fact. You will not get a fair trial in that state. They will crucify you. And if they denied
Yeah,
your, if
let's
they denied
inspire some
your,
debate.
well, if they denied his change of venue, then they're trying to keep him there because they're trying to crucify him. That's all I wanted to say about that. It's like if Chauvin can get the book thrown at him that hard, then I don't think Rittenhouse has a chance. And honestly, I don't think that kid helped himself at all. When that first all went down, and we got to hear and see the details of what situation he was put into and why he had to do what he did, the first thing that came to mind to me was, oh my God, somebody call Masad Ayub to come in as a character witness. Somebody get him to come to this kid's trial and talk about the justified use of deadly force and being forced into a corner and his duty to retreat and every step he took not to try to take somebody's life. That man is the utmost authority on justified use of deadly force. If it had stopped there, I'd be a lot more confident in this trial coming up. But the fact that that kid just went nuts on social media afterwards and made public appearances and stuff in defiance of a kid who's supposed to be scared for his life at this trial that's coming up, it's almost as if he's like challenging them to try to bust me. And it's like, they're going to do it. If they can, they will. And they'll throw the book at him too. And they will point out these pictures and selfies he's taking. What the hell is going on out there? You guys hear that?
No.
Oh, good. You're spared, my stupid dogs.
I, I hear that now.
Yeah. Now that I mention it, right? So anyway, God.
Mine do a hell of a lot bigger bark than that.
Yeah, well, that's only 5 out of 6 because one of them's been laying here the whole time next to me, and she's totally cool with it. She just wants her chin rubs. Yeah, so my dad's got dementia. My mom's sort of, I don't know, she's acting like she's got it too, actually, now that I think about it. But every time these dogs bark, I tell her, I'm like, you got to nip this in the bud. So I'm like, I always jokingly say, beat the little bastard, beat them. And she's like, how are you so mean? You delivered half these dogs that we have. How can you beat them? And I'm like, look. And I went out to the shed and I grabbed a piece of pipe insulation, that foam stuff. I cut off a section about 20 inches and I took another section and I fashioned like a little loop handle, hot glued it together. And I was like, use this. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, you'll see the next time they bark. So I was sitting in the living room one day and her dog started barking. And I stood up and I grabbed that little foam thing and I walked up to him and I just bopped him on top of the head. And if he was a turtle that was 10 feet wide, he would have retracted into his shell about the size of a quarter of an inch. Like he rolled up into a ball with his face like drawn up tight and his eyes closed. And he looked like I just fucking shot him. And I just went pop, 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 pop with this little foam thing, right? Like you can hit your arm as hard as you want with it, and you're not gonna feel a damn thing. But the fact that I did it, the action of it, it offended him so badly he didn't bark the rest of the day. And I'm like, use this. And all that barking you just heard before, I guarantee you, she just laid on the couch and just let it happen. And I'm like, you're not teaching them anything by just ignoring this. She thinks being an authoritarian and a disciplinarian is abusive. I'm like, no, dogs are like children. They're like infant children. You have to give them structure and order. You give them boundaries and you show them that these are the boundaries you cannot cross. You don't have to kill them. You don't have to abuse them. I took a little foam thing and just popped them with it. And just that, oh, I don't want that because that sucks. And they eventually like, okay, if I do this, this is going to happen to me. Just like when I potty train my dogs. It's like, take them out on a leash, walk them around, do not let them back in the house until they do their business. As soon as they do it, bring them in, give them a treat. And it's like, oh, if I go do this out here, I get one of these in here. And then if they do something in here, bop them with that foam thing. And they're like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that in here. It's so simple, and they can't do it. Anyway.
I'll tell you, the most effective training aid I've found for my damn dogs is a squirt bottle with water in it. That will put a fucking stop to whatever the hell they're doing.
You know that there was an old adage that if a dog pees on the floor, rub their nose in it, they won't like it. I had a schnauzer one time, and he was white. And Midnight's going to say that's racist, but he was white. And he peed on the floor. And I grabbed him, and I rubbed his nose in it. His mustache turned yellow. So then I had to go take him outside and wash him. Did that twice. Dog acquired a taste for piss. Never rubbed a dog's nose in it again. The thing that I learned to get him to stop peeing in certain places, my mailman actually taught me this. Apple cider vinegar. Like, for instance, there was this part of my mom's couch that her dog hates. Like, her dog is essentially Dave Chappelle with the couch, if you know what I mean. And he picks this one corner of the couch every time, walks up to it, cocks his leg, and lets it rip. And I'm like, you gonna stop him, or am I just gonna have to take that couch outside and burn it? And she goes, what should I do? So I told my mailman. He goes, oh yeah, just get a squirt bottle, put some apple cider vinegar in it. He's like, steam clean your couch and get that stain out, and then spray the vinegar around the outside edge of the couch. And he's like, for the first day or two, it's gonna smell, but he was like, after about a day, the smell will be so reduced to you that you won't smell it. But the dog, who can smell particles in parts per million compared to us, they can't stand it. So I was like, let me try it. So I sprayed around the bottom of the couch, and sure as shit, 2 days later, I watched that dog walk up to the couch, got to the corner, started sniffing at it, and just reared back like he got shot in the face and ran away from the couch. And I thought, wow, that worked. And I didn't heed the mailman's advice. He said after you do that, you gotta spray it again like every fifth or sixth day. And after about 2 weeks, they learn not to go there anymore. And I didn't do that. By the fifth or sixth day, I forgot, and the smell had wore off, and he walked up there and cocked his leg and let it rip. So I gotta clean it and respray it, and hope he still hates the smell, because that stuff is pretty pungent. Oh, since we're talking about keeping animals away from certain things, if you have stray cats or feral cats, which a couple years ago, for some reason, there was a bunch of them in my neighborhood, mothballs. Like, just grab a couple mothballs and just drop them in corners of your yard and, like, in your gardens or whatever. And even if it gets rained on, they melt or whatever. They hate that. Like, no feral cats after, like, a day of that. And then I've got a fountain in my front yard and my backyard, and mosquitoes like to drop larvae in it or whatever. So I drained both fountains, but the mosquitoes are already, all over the place. If you get Irish Spring bar soap and a potato peeler, and you go to like just, little areas across your yard that are like shady or dark or cool or moist, just skin a couple of shavings of that stuff in your garden or whatever. And within a couple of hours, mosquitoes are gone. Like, gone. Like, they don't even exist. They hate the smell of it. So, life hack. And after a couple of weeks, it melts and they're gone anyway. So there's upkeep to that too. So anyway, so we know where Scott's going. He's going to an air show type thing. What are you doing today, Tony?
I'm staying close to the bathroom. I got some sort of fucking stomach bug. I'm even right now want to go throw up.
Yep. I am going to attempt to clear out my reloading bench today and try to wheel it out, because I have acquired the correct gunpowder to load the rounds for my Dutch Beaumont. And I'm really excited to try that.
Which powder is it?
So, for those who don't know, a Dutch Beaumont is an 1871-88. So it was originally made in 1871 as a single-shot rifle, and then the Dutch picked up the Vitali magazine conversion in 88, 1 year after the Italians. I suspect what happened is the Dutch were watching the Italians do the same thing with the Vetterli, because the Vetterli's a 7087 and the Beaumont's at 7188. But anyway, it's the Dutch Beaumont's a black powder rifle, and I was looking for a way to load it, so I found the brass and I found all that shit, and I was looking for powder because most of the people on gun channels know I'm sort of anti rimfire and I'm absolutely anti black powder because it's just messy and I don't want to clean it. It's just me. I'm just lazy. So anyway, I was bouncing load datas off of a couple of gun people, and I came across a video from Iraq veteran from about 10 years ago. So I reached out to him, and I'm like, did this powder work out well? Did your Beaumont blow up? You know, did you chrono your loads and all this other stuff? And he was like, yeah. He goes, the reason I didn't make a second video was because I used that loading, and it worked so well that I haven't changed it, and that's my pet load. So accurate 5744 is the powder that I'm using for the Beaumont, and upon looking it up, it's probably the fastest burning powder you can buy that's not black powder, and it actually comes up like the description of it. It says this powder can be used in a wide range of rifle calibers and magnums, and it has been used as a large capacity black powder substitute. So, if you want a smokeless powder substitute for black powder, accurate 5744. And what I would highly recommend you do is, for the Dutch Beaumont, for instance, the original recipe for black powder was 70 or 75 grains. It's a lot. For the smokeless, the 5744, it's 1/3 that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that proportionally any gun that's black powder would do 1/3. I'm not going to tell you that. What I'm going to tell you is start off like somebody used to tell me that one way you could do loadings universally and build up is start with 10 grains of unique for a rifle, because that's usually enough to get it out of the barrel. Then chronograph it and then tune your load accordingly. But for the 5744, my loading is going to be 25 grains. It's the Iraq veteran loading, and I'll chrono it from there. But I think probably what you're going to want to do is ask around, do your research, ask other people who may have done it before you. And if you're going to be the first, start with a very conservative loading of it and then slowly work your way up. So, for instance, since 5744 is advertised as an extremely fast-burning powder, it's going to flash off like black powder, which is what you want, but it's obviously more potent, so you want to do it very reduced. Build a load that will get that bullet out of the barrel. So if I'm running 25 on this, if I was the first one to do it, I probably would have ran 15 and then just see what happens. If it goes out of the barrel, then, chrono it. And if it's only like 500 or 600 feet per second, I'm like, okay, we've obviously got room to grow. And then work my way up. After every shot, I would inspect the brass, check the primer, stuff like that. But thankfully, this one has already a loading that somebody else has done and has been running it for 10 years. He's still got the same gun. There's no bulging. There's no nothing. So I think what you may start to see is a lot of people are going to start looking for alternatives. Like, I follow a guy named the Koba 49, and he's really, really big on milsurps. And even he touches on alternative loadings. So this is my first foray into it, and thankfully it's already something that's been done and used and tried and works. And I will probably do a video on it just to share it with the ether, because nobody's done a reloading video with this. They just said, I'm using this recipe. So I'll probably do one. The other thing is I have to use 45 Colt bullet seating die, because I didn't spend the $300 on a CH-4D die set for this. Not yet. I will eventually, but not yet.
Well, before you stick gun parts into your head, please will me your revolvers.
Well, that's why I'm saying I'm starting low. So if it doesn't go out of the barrel, I'll take the gun apart and cleaning rot it out. But thankfully for the Beaumont, I already have a loading. The other cool thing is my other Vitali, my Vetterli Vitali, uh, there's a smokeless load for that already. Thankfully for that, in the annals of history, they did go smokeless on the Vetterli Vitali because the locking action was good enough for it. Despite the fact that the locking lugs are built into the bolt handle, which is a separate piece from the bolt body, and it's at the back of the gun, it still works. So I've got a smokeless loading for that, and I've got now a smokeless loading for the Dutch Beaumont. But there's not very many black powder rifles that I want anyway. Like I'd like to have a Kropatschek, and I'd like to have a Fruworth, and I forgot the name of it now. It's like a Kaiser Wilhelm carbine or something like that. But that's it. Everything else is pretty modern. I don't have a
I don't
load.
know. First thing I would do is go to Accurate's website and see if they had data.
They don't. I already checked. They don't. They claim to be black powder substitutes, um, but the Dutch Beaumont Vitali is so old in terms of just firearm vintage that it's not really something they cover. Now, one of the other things I've found is you can do like there's a book called Cartridges of the World or Cartridge Conversions of the World or something like that. Uh, Slim Cowboy has a copy of it actually, and I think I'm going to buy one too. And what that does is it's a compendium of load datas for making old brass cartridges in calibers that aren't made anymore out of newer brass, what die sets it would take and how to do it, which I think is pretty cool. What I'm going to do in terms of milsurps, since I go on the estate sale tours in my area, is I'm going to start collecting load data books from the 50s and older if possible. Because what you can do then is the older books will obviously have recipes for older guns that are no longer manufactured today. So it's like, cool, there's a load data for it. But it may have a powder that isn't manufactured anymore. But see, that's easy enough to overcome because what you can do is now that you have a load table for a gun that isn't made anymore, in a caliber that's probably not supported anymore, in a powder that's not made anymore, you can use the one book to get the brass to make it, or maybe somebody already makes it, or if you're Bertram Brass, you make new production of it, which is pretty expensive, but at least they offer it. And then start doing your cross referencing work. What powder replaced that powder? And then find out if that new powder works at the same ratio as the old one. Or if not, somebody out there by now has probably said, oh, yeah, this powder, like I've got a tin of Hercules Bullseye. I'm pretty sure Bullseye's still made, but let's just say it isn't, just for for argument's sake. Let's say this old ass square tin of Bullseye's. Let me grab it. It's old. This was made in like I think 1959. Yeah. So unopened, still has the metal pull tab thing, the freshness seal. Like this has never been opened. Smokeless Bullseye pistol powder, right? Let's say this isn't made anymore. Hercules became Alliant, if I'm not mistaken, or it got bought out by Alliant, whichever. I would take that, and let's say I was going to load a. Again, this is a gun that's still in circulation, but let's just say it isn't. Let's say I have a 1903 pocket hammerless, and it calls for 10 grains of bullseye, which is obviously too much, but you get my point. I'm just using simple numbers here. I would find the brass or buy it, and then I would hit the Googles, and I would say, what powder replaced Hercules Bullseye? and it would say, "Oh, Alliant Unique," and I'll say, "Okay," and then I would say, uh, "Does Bullseye and Unique work at the same ratio of load data?" And it would say, "Oh no, no, no! Unique is far more efficient. So if you had a Hercules recipe, you would only load to 50% of Unique. So if it was 10 grains of Hercules, then I would obviously load 5 grains of Unique, and off I go." So getting the older books actually does have a value. Stop barking. Anyway, yeah, so you can do that. It's a little bit of cross-referencing and detective work, but eventually you can get a workable load data. I gotta let the dog out. Give me just a sec.
Okay.
All right. That gave me a
Uh,
chance to clear my sinuses too. Jesus.
I can tell you that directly from Hodgdon's website,
Hmm.
they said that Trail Boss at 70% of case capacity will work in anything. Now, I'm sure by anything they mean anything smokeless.
Sure. Because it's high volume and low pressure, but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
enough to
It,
push the bullet out of the barrel.
it sucks up a lot of freaking volume. And it's also fairly fast. It's right close to Tiger for speed. I would
Is
have
it
to look
really?
at. Yeah.
Wow. Because that's some high energy stuff.
Which is why I didn't believe that shit because I heard it from somebody else. I didn't believe that shit until I actually went on Hodgdon's site and found it.
Hmm.
Yeah, they do say that. Hold on, let me look. See if my data sheet's still up here.
Hello.
Hello.
What's up, guys?
Chilling.
Hello, who's here?
Zorro. Or Benjamin.
It's Zorro.
On the list, Tight Group is number 14 on the list of 101 or 2, whatever the hell there is.
Hmm.
And Trail Boss is 19.
Hmm. So, oh yeah. Oh, I forgot. I did this in the intro. So in my weekend review, by the way, uh, I live in Southeast Texas near Houston, and the average ground temperature, okay, you can check your weather report, and it'll always give you the temperature in the air almost 200 feet up in an air traffic controller's tower. But we don't live there, do we? We live on the ground. The average ground temperature in my area last week, from Monday to Friday, was 106 degrees.
Oh,
Every.
good God Almighty.
Hang on.
Here just a few months ago, you was bitching because it was too cold.
Hang on. Because of that, what I'm about to say next should be absurd. I caught a cold. So,
Why is it absurd?
because it's 106 outside, you got a cold. What the hell? I know it's a virus, whatever, but so Tuesday I had a pretty good day because I always say that because for some reason when my boss's wife is at the shop, everyone behaves like they're under a microscope because she's missing her calling in life. Seriously, like this woman, if she was born in the 30s, she would have been the perfect East German Stasi cop in the 50s. Like that's the kind of woman she is. So when she wasn't at work Tuesday, I had a great day. And you know what's really funny? When she's not there, more stuff gets done production wise in the entire shop. The only thing that doesn't get done more is outbound shipping orders. But like in terms of production and packaging and everything else at the shop, more gets done. So Tuesday was a good day. Then she came back Wednesday. Things slowed down. Then she wasn't back on Thursday, and I had another good day. Then I woke up Friday morning with this cold. So I show up to work, and she's standing there, and her nose is about as red as a beet. And she looks like she just did like 3 rounds in the octagon. And I looked at her, and I'm like, do you have a cold? And she goes, yes. And I looked at her, and I'm like, no, you don't. We have a cold. And she goes, oh, did you get it? I'm like, yes. So you and I are going to be miserable together. And she kind of laughed. And then every time someone came into work, I would kind of recite that. I was like, get away from us. We got a cold. We're miserable. Fuck off. But yeah, now I'm dealing with it today. And as a gripe, I went to the grocery store yesterday to share my virus-infected joy with others, right? Actually, I went because I had to go get Dayquil and NyQuil. And I bought some, and I'm looking at this stuff, and I got to point something out. They have watered down the gel caps of Dayquil and NyQuil, and I know it for a fact. You don't even have to convince me. I know it. I took it out of the package, and I'm looking at it, and the gel inside these caps are half the color they should be. Like, these things look like Kool-Aid with too much water in it. And I thought, what the actual fuck? Because usually when I take these Dayquils, after about 40 minutes, what happens to me when they start to work, I can only describe as effervescence in the back of my head. For some reason, when this starts to work, I feel this fizzing sensation like up the back of my neck into the back of my head. And it's kind of a cool feeling, but it also, I feel better, right? I've already taken 2 of the Dayquil ones. Nothing. I took the NyQuil ones, and the ones before that were like super dark green that you could barely see through, I would take 2 of those, and in 40 minutes, I was in a coma. These I took, and I was up for 3 hours before I went to bed. Like, what the actual fuck? Why did they water this shit down? And it's still $14 a box. Anyway, that's what I'm dealing with. That's my weekend. I gave you the news. I'm dealing with a cold. I'm about to lose my voice. After I'm done with this stream today, I'm going to finish editing the last 30 of The Long Dark. Tony, I know you're not really a gamer, but that's the one game I think you would actually play just because it's a survival type thing in a blizzard in northern Canada with bears and wolves and moose, and it's pretty good. Like, the graphics are minimalist, but it's pretty good. Anyway.
So you're saying it's the new Oregon Trail?
Not exactly. I mean, the thing I'm
It
doing.
doesn't say you have died of dysentery.
No, I died of like. You
Freezing
can
to
die of bear attack. You can die of infection. You can die of frostbite, bleed out, starvation. There's a lot of stuff you could die from. But the game's been out since actually 2014. But the thing is I don't remember it being that old. I played the very, very early adopter builds, and I swear I didn't start playing those until like 2017 at least. But anyway, it's been out for a long time. The single player story mode, there's dozens of people who have done it on YouTube. I'm doing the one called the Sandbox Survival, which is just you get to use the entire map, like all the regions, and it's just walk around and try to survive as long as you can. And there was a really big challenge on YouTube a couple years back. The hardest mode is called Interloper. There's almost no food. There's almost no ammunition. Actually, no, sorry. In Interloper, there's no guns. So there's 3 modes: Voyager, Pilgrim, Stalker, and then there's Interloper. And I'm playing Stalker, which is the hardest mode that has guns. But in Interloper, there's no guns. There's almost no food. There's almost no clothing. And your best weapon is, I think, a bow and arrow. There's a bow and arrow, and there's a bear spear now too. They added that. It's huge. But the challenge was survive 1,000 days in game in Interloper. I think the longest I ever survived in Interloper was 3 days. Like I'm no good at it. I watch a guy on YouTube called Athenon, and he's a dude that lives up in the Pacific Northwest, and that dude is masterful at Interloper. Like he's very good at it. And he does these playthroughs where he's on stream. He used to do it before Twitch, now he does it on Twitch too. His long dark playthroughs are 6 to 8 hour streams, nonstop. And I'm just like, Jesus, man, that guy's a trooper, and he has a day job too. So like one time he took a day off. He did a 24-hour stream, Interloper. Like he would just get up to go to the bathroom and eat. But he was 24 hours. I'm like, that dude's a trooper. He's a bit weird though, but he's a trooper. Anyway, I'm doing the one in Stalker. I managed to spawn in one of the best maps to start in, and I did a 5-part series. The final 30 of it will be today. I'll release it today. Thankfully, I recorded it before I caught the cold, so I don't sound like this. And then I'll probably stream, or I'll probably do another series on a couple other games I picked up the other day. And then I'll go back, because when you do the Long Dark, it's one of those things where you can do 100 episodes on it. Like I'll come back to it from time to time and just pick up where we left off for the survival part of it. I find it fascinating because like I've spent time up in that region and I really like it. Like I probably will retire up there. But firearms discipline in Stalker mode is important because ammunition is scarce. They did add the fact that you can pick up your casings, you can find gunpowder, you can melt down car batteries for the lead, and you can make bullets. So I thought that was cool. And there's a couple of reloading benches in the map, but there's only like they're sparse. Like you have to find them. So I thought that was cool. You know, it's like managing your sleep, managing your calorie intake, managing your ammunition usage, because I did this one episode where there was a wolf coming at me. So I squatted down and met him at eye level. I waited until he was really close, and the instant he lurched forward to try to bite me, that's when I shot him. So I maximized the use of my ammo and I got him in one shot. But then later on, another one came, and I waited, and the first shot missed, but the shot scared him. So he turned around, and just as he turned around, I literally shot him right in the culo. In the ass. So I wasted 2 rounds, and I didn't even kill him. I shot him in the ass, and he ran off. Now, in that game, they do take into account bleed out. So if I wanted to, I could have tried. This game teaches you a lot. It teaches you orienteering, because there's no compass. It teaches you tracking, because, for instance, I shot the wolf. I could follow his trail, footprints in the snow. I could follow the blood trail. And when you first shoot him, the blood spatter on the ground is big. And then as he's running away, the blood spatter gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So like, by the time you find him, he may have bled out to the point where he's already dead and he fell over, or you might come across him and he's barely walking because he's still trying to get away from you and then falls over. Or the horrible third option is you shoot him, he runs away, you track him, he doubles back, and as he's running towards you, he will attack you again. And you won't even know. Like, you'll come over the top of the hill and all of a sudden he's right in your face. So, in my last 30 playthrough today, coming out today, something pretty shocking happens in that one. And it happens in like the first couple of minutes. So, if you watch that series, it's going to have a pretty cool ending. But I'm still alive, and I will go back to it in another 5 episodes, probably in like a week or 2. But I picked up a couple other titles. And I know, like, if you're one of the gun guys on my channel, and you're looking at my reviews, or my reloadings, or my This Old Gats and things like that, you're probably a little frustrated by all the game stuff. I'm sorry about that. It's just, I do multiple things on my channel. I break from the norm. And one of these days I'm going to do a video called So You Want to Be a YouTuber. Because I'm going to pass on what somebody else taught me about how to create a channel that's successful. I don't consider myself a success. I just consider myself at a point where creating the content has become easy and sort of enjoyable, and I want to pass that on to somebody else, especially if somebody hasn't started one yet. A lot of people say that it's too late to do it. You know, like for my shop, my business at work, uh, if you want to start a store on eBay, most people say it's too late now because you could do it and you could put an item for sale and have it for 1 cent, and there would be 100 other sellers who have been there for 10 or 20 years who have stellar super ratings, and they could have it for $100 and they'll be listed above you. So the frugal shopper will change the search string to lowest price first or whatever and maybe find you. But it's really hard to get started on eBay today as opposed to starting at the ground floor. See, our business started at the ground floor with Walmart, Newegg, and Amazon, so we're pretty successful there. Same thing with YouTube. A lot of people say that it's had its heyday, it's long gone, Apocalypse killed it all. You can't, be successful on here anymore. To which I say bullshit. Because the only thing YouTube is good for is the ocean. And what I mean by that is, you are the content creator, you are a fisherman. Your content is the bait you throw out into the ocean, and the ocean is YouTube's viewers. And that's all they're good for. You're not doing this for the money. You're doing this for viewers. If you're a gun guy, you're definitely not doing this for money, because there is no money for gun content on YouTube. What you're doing is you're putting the information out there to get the viewers. Then if you want to do a Patreon or a Subscribe Star or a Utreon or whatever, they can choose to do so. YouTube is only good for the ocean of fish that you're putting your lure out there for. So I want to share what I've learned in the last 5 years of doing this. Eventually. I said I wasn't going to do it until I reached 1,000 subscribers. Just because people are going to look at me and go, wow, you've got 500 subscribers, what the hell do you know? And they'd be right. So I'm only sharing what I've learned so far. I'm not saying this is a be-all, end-all. So there's that. My sinuses are all plugged up again, so I'm probably sounding crappy as usual. Coming soon, in terms of gun stuff, for my channel at least, I'm going to purchase a few wall mount systems to hang my milsurps on the wall. The room that I'm in now, I have probably a 20-foot long wall that I've never used for anything. I don't hang pictures or anything on it. And I always looked at it going, what could I put up there? And I never thought of anything to put up there. So I've got these milsurps that are, 54, 56 inches long, several of them. And I thought what I would do is I would buy a couple of wall mounts. Each one holds 4 rifles. And I think I'm going to start with 2 of them and hang 8 rifles on the wall. And then if it goes well, I'll buy 1 more to make it 12. And that should cover the whole wall. And then I'll probably do a video on that hardware, that mount system, because it's gotten verbal and star reviews, but it hasn't gotten photos put up, so I'll do a video review of that, because I think it's a good product. I'm not 100%
What
sure.
brand rack you're getting, John?
It's from a company called Hold Up. And as far as I'm aware, the verticals are hickory, and then they're urethane-coated steel hooks that screw into steel inserts in the hickory. The original one I was going to buy was American Furniture Systems or something like that. It was kind of a nice-looking rustic pine rack, but the biggest complaint is whoever designed those racks for that company don't know shit about wood. Because what they did is those racks are big pieces of wood that's got grooves cut into them, and then you slip your rifles down into them. Well, the problem with that is is, first of all, the way that they cut the slots, your rifles go into this rack at an angle, so they don't look right up against the wall. They look like they're tilted inward by 40 degrees. The second thing is they cut the slots into the wood so the grain runs vertical up the wall, meaning that if you put a 10-pound rifle in that slot, the grain is going straight up and down into your rifle, which is a fracturing point. If you know anything about wood, it's like pulling apart string cheese. So if you have the string cheese pointing straight up and down, and you drop a rifle on top of the string, the weight of the rifle is eventually going to pull the strings apart. And the biggest complaint I saw with that system was, you guys owe me money because $3,000 worth of hunting rifles sheared your stupid hook system, and all my guns hit the floor and broke my $1,500 optic and ruined my $10,000 rifle or whatever. And I thought, ooh, yeah, I'm not buying that one. Because you can see the grain in all the photos they provide, and it's like, that's not going to work. You want the grain perpendicular to your rifle, not parallel with it. Because if you do it parallel, you're just going to tear the wood's going to eventually split and tear, especially if you take the rifle out once or twice. Because every time you drop it in there, it's going to have that little shock load where it bottoms out. And it doesn't seem like much, but it's like, if you try to tear a piece of paper and you hold it, nothing happens. If you bump your elbow against the wall while you're holding that piece of paper, you'll tear it without even trying. It just boop, and it just rips. That little shock just starts it.
There's those of us who love our fine hunting rifles and gingerly put them in whatever rack they got.
Yeah.
Don't drop the fucking things.
Well, no, but that's the whole point. If you have the right rack for it, that's fine. But in the case of this particular one, the wood grain it works against you. It's vertical. So like the grain itself will start to pull apart just from the weight of the rifles being on it. The guy said, the guy who put the picture up there, he said his rifle with the optic was 13 pounds. It was a .458 Winchester Magnum elephant gun, basically. He put it on the rack, and he it's got like felt things on the inside, and he slipped it in there. And what had happened was, it decided that it just didn't want to hold up anymore. The grain split, the rifle went through the split, and then it hit the rifle underneath it, and the combined weight of the two rifles broke the next one, and then those dropped down and hit the third rifle and broke that one. So when he got home, all three of his rifles were on the ground. Two of his optics were completely shattered, and like the dents in the wood on the rifles were, grotesque.
I would have to have witnessed that fucking happening to believe it, to be honest with you.
I can send you the link. Like, the reviews are pretty damning. But the solution would have been simple. You cut the slots perpendicular to the grain, and it wouldn't happen. You do it with the grain, it'll happen. Because your rifle basically acts like a log splitter at that point. But anyway, I'm not going to buy that one. I'm going to buy the one with the steel hooks anyway, so it doesn't matter. Like, I found an alternative. It costs like $10 more, but it's probably going to be more reliable. And it's more minimalist, too. Like, the American Furniture Products one, it looked good, but it looked really big and cumbersome. This one, it's just two thin pieces of hickory with steel inserts. You screw the hooks in, and you hang your rifle on the hooks. Job done. So the focal point will be the rifle itself, not this thing that's holding it up.
Just put you up a freaking board wall thing and
No.
put with dowels in it.
No. No, because I sleep in this room, so I don't want it to look at hell. I really wanted to build a Punisher wall with the slats. I got this wall cabinet in another room, and in the wall cabinet there's a recess that goes in 24 inches, and I wanted to put a slat wall behind that, at the back of that, and hang rifles up there. And I might still do that with more modern guns. Like, I'll hang like my ARs and my KP9 and, a couple of my other guns on there. That'd be cool. might go that route. Yep. So I have a cold in June. It sucks.
Rip. Is it COVID?
No, it's a cold. I can still taste things.
Okay.
Can you smell them?
No, because my nose is plugged up, you idiot. Like, I got that white flower oil, right? And I put a couple of... I took an eyedropper and just put drops of it straight down my nose. Let me tell you, that shit burns. But usually it clears my sinuses out for a good hour or 2 hours, right? This time, I put it in there, it burned, made my eyes water, cleared my sinuses for about 5 minutes, and it came right back. So, yeah, whatever I got's pretty damn aggressive. But no fever, no body aches or anything like that. It's just my head's stuffy, my throat's a little bleh. And when your throat's kind of like this, everything tastes kind of salty. Like everything. So,
That's because everything is
You're kind of
coated in
lagging out like
snot.
crazy.
yeah,
Or
everything's
maybe it's
coated.
my internet.
Everything's getting like a little bit of mucus on it. So, yeah, everything's a bit salty. Like I'm actually thinking about maybe making a Dutch apple pie and dropping some French vanilla ice cream on the side because there's no way in hell that'll be salty. But if it is, then I'll be salty.
You just need to slather yourself down with some Vicks. That'll help clear up the sinuses.
Well, sort of.
The salty part, I guess, huge amounts of liquor.
I was gonna do Cajun cough syrup, but I don't have a cough. Like my throat doesn't
So,
hurt like that.
Ooh. Oh, I'd be pissed if I was that dude.
So apparently there is embers burning in the rubble in the Miami condo wreckage now. I
Oh,
think at this point they're going to have to start sending in cadaver dogs, which is very tragic because trying to get somebody, assuming somebody's going to survive after 2 days after having hundreds of tons of concrete on top of them, and then the rain turned the dust back into concrete a second time, and then there's something on fire under there. That's if you are a survivor in that, and this is your end. That's what a horrible way to go.
no shit. They said what made it fall yet?
No, they don't know. So there's been a couple
they,
of theories. One was that they were doing roof repairs, and there was a crane who loaded this stuff down on the roof. But the problem is that the crane had dropped it and weakened the roof, and then everything accordioned on top after the structure failed. Like they dropped it on the roof, and it didn't collapse yet, and they were like, "Oh, it's probably fine." Then they unhooked the cargo, called it a day, and then later on that night, the whole thing collapsed in on itself. That's one theory. Another one was that there was a sinkhole forming underneath it, but there's no geological evidence to support that yet. But because Florida is a giant limestone sponge of terra firma underneath the surface, it is believable. It's feasible. But they don't actually
well,
have.
that's what I read.
Yeah, but they don't actually have a definitive. This is what caused it yet.
Well, no, they said there was a study done in like the 90s or something that
Yeah.
showed that area was starting to sink.
I believe it. The whole state is just a giant limestone cavernous sponge.
You're talking about the
No, if you look up.
Miami thing?
Yeah. So I actually saw a video of a guy who uh, he went out to a public park, and in the public park there was what looked like a retention pond. And he walked out in scuba gear, and I thought, what the hell's going on? And then there was another guy standing above him with what looked like a kite, but what it was ground penetrating radar. So this guy goes down into this retention pond, and at the bottom there's a hole, and he goes horizontal down the hole, and he swims for 2.5 miles underneath the surface of Florida's surface, right? And what it was a giant network of limestone caves that were filled with water. And the guy above was walking with ground penetrating radar, and he was pinging the guy underneath him. So when he was swimming through these
Yeah, they're
caves,
mapping.
you have to have cannonball sized nuts to do this. Because down there, there's no light. And it's very tight spaces, right? And you have to be a master of your air control and your breathing and everything. But anyway, this guy's doing this. And the guy above is walking at the same time. And he's like, yep, he's still below us. He's still below us. And this guy's walking across streets. He walked through a convenience store. He walked through an apartment complex. And he was like, all these people don't realize there's a cave full of water underneath their feet. And, you know, when they brought up that theory that there was a sinkhole, that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, huh, maybe there's a cave under there that just collapsed. But that one wouldn't have been full of water. Because if this building collapsed on top of a sinkhole full of water, you would think the water would have gushed up underneath as displacement. But
Well, if the caves are full of water, it ain't going to really collapse all that easy because water doesn't compress.
But it's not trapped water though, you see. It's a cave network.
You can go all
It would just
the
push it.
places.
Yeah, it would displace. So, like you were saying, it would pressurize it as all this stuff came on top of it. But the pressure would squirt water up through the hole that the stuff is coming down from as a start, and it would also push all the water in the rest of the cave network and create a current outward, which may cause shallower parts of this to burst through the surface. Because we're talking hundreds of tons of concrete, right? So if you
You're also
squirted that much
talking.
water, you'd have geysers pop up in low-lying areas.
You're also talking about hundreds of tons of water.
Right, but the concrete would displace the water. It would pressurize it because it's got to go somewhere. The concrete will never float on it. But anyway, the point
No, it
is
doesn't have the density.
it's a good theory. If the cave system under there is dry, it's a perfect theory because no water. But we're not going to know for like realistically years.
Yeah, if it was hollow underneath,
Yeah, it would just fall. That would be it.
slight tremor could bring it all down. Now the question is how long did it take people in the rest of the building to say, I'm out of here for fucking ever. I ain't never going back in.
Well, if the building collapsed at 2:31 a.m., I'm pretty sure that those people made that distinction by 2:31 and 10 seconds. They were like, fuck this. I'm going back to California where it's safer.
I only have to worry about fire, and I can see that.
I only got to worry about fire and tidal waves and floods and Prop 65 and
And liberals,
liberals and freaking Tyrannosaurus Rexes that print stickers.
Patrol.
And feminists.
Poop patrol.
Oh yeah, and the poop patrol, exactly. And illegals and just yeah. At least I don't have to
Getting
worry about my
shot
house.
by
Well, now you know what? They wouldn't be safer because they have mudslides.
Yeah,
So
that's what usually happens after they have fires.
yeah. So yeah, pick your poison, I guess.
Yep.
go
Let's
to
see.
Texas.
My
Then all you got to worry about is freezing winter and boiling summer.
Well, my current poison, it's only 50 degrees today over there. And it's going to have a low of 42 in June. On Tuesday, it's going to be 60 degrees. I'm like, I could do that. I could do that. I could live in a place that's 40 to 70 degrees almost all year round. That's fine. Get a lot more mileage out of them boots I bought.
Yeah, but you know
I'll
what the
tell
problem
you.
with that is?
I haven't got to wear them yet.
The frequent temperature swings.
I haven't got to wear
That's
them
when you
yet.
tend to get more sick.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. If you're in a place where, like, there was a time in here in Texas. I want to say it was March, around March. There was like this seesawing effect where it would be 90 one day, and then 30 the next day, and then 90 again the second day or third day, and then like 65 the third day, fourth day. You know, it would seesaw back and forth. And those temperature swings is what would cause people to get sick. You're right. Like every time. Which is why when I catch colds in June, I'm always pissed off. Because I wake up, it's 90 degrees. And then it ends up being like 108 later that day. It's like, no. No, it's just hot. Ah, we have an HVS. Welcome. Willkommen. Oh, so update. My buddy with the coins, right? So he had one coin that was what they considered old, was it almost AU, almost uncirculated. That coin was valued at $1,200. All the other coins were worthless because he put them in a tumbler to clean them. I didn't know that because he didn't tell me that. I'm like, you're an idiot. He had 20 of those coins. If he left them alone, they wouldn't be worth $1,200 like the one he had, but they wouldn't be worthless either because he put them in a damn tumbler. So I live and learn. Ooh, my sinus is clear.
Yeah, cleaning that old shit devalues it. It's weird, but that is what it is.
Well, yeah. He put it in a tumbler full of ceramic chips. I'm like, do you not know how metal works? He's like, well, I know now. I'm like, yeah, just think of what it cost you.
Well, you could have done it with Barasso where it wouldn't affect the metal at all. It still would have killed value.
Yeah. Yeah, because then it'll just start tarnishing the surface. I use Brasso.
I
Sometimes
got
just
nice
use Mars
Barasso
back
clean
polish
cases
and
with. Or Tarnex, I wonder if that shit's still around because that was almost miraculous how that worked.
Tarnex for me, like, okay, this is old people time because that's old stuff. I remember it as a child. My mom used to use it. Tarnex came in this black bottle with like a chrome silver label, and you would pour that in like a bowl, and then you would take like your silver spoon, and you would drop it down in there, and it would change color instantly right before your very eyes. And you would pull it out, and you'd wipe it off, and you'd put it down, and in some cases, your silver spoon would instantly start turning yellow again. You're like, what the hell?
I
That
never
stuff
had that
worked.
kind of reaction with brass.
Oh no, it works great with brass. Yeah, Flitz too. Like HVS is saying Flitz. Flitz works the same way. A lot of people will like some people with or dry tumblers, they will use corncob material or walnut material and they'll squirt Flitz in there with it. Um, I wet tumble with steel needle bearings, and typically I get away with just Dawn dish soap, lemon dish soap. I don't even add anything else, just dish soap, done. And then run it for 3 hours. And then it comes out looking like brand new. For brass.
I in my dry tumbler, I put like half a cup of Comet in it.
I tried that once. Somebody brought me some 303 pickup brass that out in a field or something that they found. All the brass was black. And I did that. I did a squirt of lemon dish soap, and then I put like a tablespoon of the powdered Comet, not the liquid, and ran that for about 3 hours. And it didn't look like new brass. It just looked like fired brass. But hey, I mean, from what I started and with what I ended up with, I'm perfectly happy with it.
My only bitch about it is it gets dusty in real short order.
Yeah. Oh, with dry tumbling?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I
Yeah,
went straight to wet because of that.
it starts breaking down the media
Yep.
partially too.
Yeah, I don't like doing two operations. So if you have a dry tumbler and then your media starts to get a little dusty, and you take it out, and then you got to dust your brass, right? Um, I guess I still do a two-part process, but it's easier. So I take the wet tumbler and I dump everything into like a spaghetti strainer type thing, and all the needle bearings stay in that barely, but they stay in there. All the water comes out. Take the brass, I put them in those those little plastic shell holders that like 357 Magnum comes in. It looks like almost like a brush. I stick them in there, and I just put them over a fan, and like half an hour later they're bone dry. No dust.
I heard you could use rice for dry tumbling.
You could, but it doesn't really have that abrasive action that you're looking for.
I've been threatening to use superfine sand
Hmm.
because, like, for sandblasting,
Yeah.
I'm curious how well that would work because it stripped down a car like nothing. Of course, it's running at 100 psi or so doing that way.
Well, the guy who ruined the coins, he had inherited through the estate thing a dry tumbler. He offered it to me, and I was like, no thanks. And I don't know what you would use it for, but whoever owned it had that ceramic stuff, and he also had, strangely enough, he had a bag of aquarium stones, those little tiny pea pebbles, like the colored ones,
Yeah.
and I think they're a quartz-like material. They always felt like some kind of quartz. Uh, but he had a whole bag of that unused, and I was like, huh, I wonder what you would use that for. Because what was bizarre to me is it was colored quartz stone, which means the color is going to chip off of it anyway. So did he just buy it because they didn't have clear? And then what would you use it for? I guess maybe for brass. I don't
I
know.
don't know. I think that would tend to scratch the brass up too bad.
When the crystals start to fracture apart, yeah, probably.
I figured the fine sand wouldn't be all that much more aggressive than walnut or corn cob when
I
it's new.
I could see sand working. Um, I think the
Well,
best sand to use would honestly be the stuff that you get out of White Sands Missile Range. My mom and dad lived there. I was too small to remember it, but he used to tell me that the sand there was very uniform and very fine, and you would find gypsum chips in it. And if you tried to take some and drive off the base, they would search your vehicle and take it away from you. You weren't allowed to take it with you. But he used to work with ceramics and stuff, and he would clean strip metal and stuff with it, and he would use that sand. He was like, "Yeah, it worked great." He's like, "If it didn't have the gypsum chips, we could have ran it in a sandblaster." But he put it in a cement mixer. You just throw things that he was working on in there.
Well,
Jerry
that's
Jerry
looks
Mitchell
like
has a video about
a
like
thing.
cleaning brass in a cement mixer.
Yeah, yeah. In bulk, there's practically no better substitute. They're gigantic. You put like 20,000 rounds in one if you wanted to. So there's photos of the overhanging roof sections of the Miami condo, and it appears that the overhangs had lots of like dry rot, water damage and dry rot. There was cracks, there was like plaster coming off in sheets. I guess whatever masonry was underneath the plaster was all cracked. So it's beginning to seem more and more like that theory that something heavy that they dropped on the roof probably helped finish it off. And then all the fractured pieces just started coming down, and then you had an accordion effect. Sort of like the World Trade Center situation, where the weight of the roof came down, and then the combined weight of every floor going on top made it just go faster and faster and faster. Strangely enough, um, I forgot who I was talking to last night, but I found a bunch of pictures from my youth. Um, you'll see it in the planes, trains, and automobiles. Like I know I talked about having a lot of those full size Jeeps. You're gonna see enough of those in there to make you vomit because I did find the album finally, and you'll also get to see my '59 and '60 Impala that my dad and I built, and his '54 Mercury. But anyway, in the photo disc that I found in all my stuff, uh, found my kid, found a picture of my kid, which nobody knew I had, um, and found uh, all the photos that were taken on 9/11. Like that whole disc was from about 99 to 2002. But yeah, I found this whole photo album of pictures that I had from 9/11, and it's pretty sobering to look back on those now just because these were photos that never made it to the press. Like I've got pictures of people carrying injured people from the collapsed, debris. And I got pictures of people that are taking up parts of people, which is pretty hard to look at too, but I found all those and it's pretty amazing. Like maybe I'll post a couple of those photos later. I'll wait till the anniversary of it, but I'll post a couple of pictures of the more tasteful ones here on the server later so you can see it. I can't even remember who gave them to me, but I have a couple of friends that live there and they took hundreds of photos. Like they took every photo they could at every chance they had before they were cordoned off and ran off. So anyway, ow, sorry about that.
I'm probably going to visit like Tulsa like in a month or two.
Oh, you back in the States?
No, I'm just going there to visit a friend, and I'm going to Panama too.
The hell, man. Hey,
So yeah.
what happened to your angry pencils for Tauflater Mouse?
Like, the like I'm gonna get like one more type of bullet ready, but like the fucking Chinese are like just fucking slow on it for some reason, so I'm like still waiting on getting those parts.
Well, they're kind of under the world's microscope right now. It might have a little something to do with it.
Yeah, like they're coming, but like man, I wish I could just do it a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Like I complained and they said, oh, like this is the first time we're making this type of shit, so like we have to like do all tests, all sorts of tests and shit.
Hmm.
So I literally just linked them a fucking patent to look at. Like, the patent is expired, of course, so
I told
it's
you should have just sent
doesn't
them to
matter.
me. I could have sent them to Jeff for you. It'd have been a whole lot easier.
No.
Oh, you're
I
talking about
want
the
to
new
send.
stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to send like all the bullets at once.
Yeah.
So
But he knows they're coming. Like you've already told
yep.
him. Okay.
Yeah, I did. He told me his address and shit like that.
Mm.
Oh, so I'm also going to Panama. So like I was thinking of like Panama has this thing called a friendly nations visa. So like if you live in like a first world country, like like you could just pay a little bit of tax and deposit like $5,000 into a bank account,
Mm.
like and they give you a green card. But like starting from like next month or something, they decided to like get rid of it because I guess like too much people were coming and they didn't want people to go anymore.
Too many
So
people are
like
gaming the system. Imagine that.
yeah, so like I planned on doing that when like I have some income, but like well, it's only like the entire thing only exists for like a month now, so I decided to
Just
do it.
you should just quit fucking around and just get your citizenship and come move to Texas on September 1st and you can be a constitutional carrier just like me. That pass, you can be free. It'll be hot, but you can be free. You can bring your mom
Hey,
too. Your mom can hang out with my mom. Like I'm sure
uh,
knowing how Korean women are, your mom can hang out with my mom and they can spend the entire day talking shit about how terrible their kids are. because that's what my mom does. You know what's really funny? Like maybe you can relate to this.
Hmm.
This is Korea talk for those of you who are wondering what the hell I'm on about. My mom used to compare me to her brother's kids, who are my cousins.
Yeah.
I delivered my first cousin. She's 9 years younger than me, but I was there for the delivery of my first cousin. Like I grabbed her by the I took my two index fingers and I
Mhm.
stuck them underneath her arms and I helped pull her out because
Uh,
my uncle didn't make it to the hospital in time. So like I was actually there to deliver her. And as a token of gratitude, my uncle let me name her, which was cool. But anyway, I think it was the year that as a matter of fact, it was the year that Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, so I named her Jessica after Jessica Rabbit. Anyway, she used to compare me to my cousins all the time. And I was like, "Do you know what the difference between those two cousins of mine and I am?" And she goes, "What?" And I said, "First of all, their dad works. My mom doesn't. Their dad worked overtime and refinanced their house and bankrolled both of their entire college years and allowed them to change their major twice in the process. So they spent 8 years in college." And I said, "My parents didn't do that. I had to work two jobs, and I was denied grants, and I was denied loans because apparently my dad made too much money, and because I was a homeowner at 17 years old, I no longer qualified for Pell Grants because they said I made too much money just because I applied myself and used my money wisely and bought my first house." So I was like, you live in my house and you're going to lecture me about how much better their kids are? They don't even have jobs to this day. They've been in
what?
they've been out of college for like 6 years and they still don't have a job.
So like so like what does she compare you
Because
like what does she
she thought they were
like?
so much better off than I was because they were sent to a major university. And I was like, "There's the difference. They were sent there. Somebody bankrolled it." I was like, "Do you honestly think that if I had somebody cutting the checks for me to go to a major university, that I would have fucking worked two jobs and drive a Jeep with no air conditioning? Do you honestly think I would have chose that path?" And she was like, and I'm like, "You should know the answer because you're the reason that I didn't do it." So anyway, what was funny is they started talking. Uh, my mom started talking to her brother, and I could pick out words on the phone, right? And
Mhm.
like, I don't speak Korean, but I can understand parts of it. I know that's kind of weird. Like,
Oh, oh
you
yeah,
hear it
definitely.
enough, and you kind of know
Mhm.
what they're saying, but you couldn't repeat it back to them in a conversation. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I do that with Spanish a lot too, actually. Like, I know what you're saying. I can't mouth the proper response, but I know what you're saying, and I usually tell them that in broken English so they understand what I'm saying. But anyway, um, I could hear them talking, and I could hear my mom basically say, "So they still don't have jobs?" And like I could tell by her response that my uncle probably said no. And then she said something to the effect of, "So are you gonna just try to marry them off so you can get them out of your house?" And when I heard that, it was in Korean, right?
Yeah.
I walked out and the words, "I fucking knew it," leaked out of my mouth. And she looked at me and I was like, "They're fucking worthless." It's like, that's why you don't compare me to them anymore. Anyway, Yeah, they don't compare me anymore. And what's really funny is I think my uncle's kind of embarrassed about it because they don't come over to my house for Christmas anymore. Because because it's kind of funny. When they were in college, they would come over and then my mom would ask the kids how they were doing. They're adults now, but they were kids in her eyes. She would ask them how they're
Hmm.
doing. They would talk about their experiences in college, and then she would shoot me a dirty look. Like they were better or something. Like they were flexing on me or something. And I'm like, "What the fuck? I went to college. I just didn't finish it because I couldn't afford to because I had to keep my house from getting taken from me, shit like that. I had to keep the lights on." So anyway, I don't think they do that anymore because one year, the last year they came over, my uncle was like, "So what are you up to?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm still working for the same guy." And I said, and my mom doesn't seem to think that's a big deal, but I was like, "How many people do you know can say that they've worked for the same company at the time? How many people can you say that they worked for the same company for nearly 12 years? Like, how many people get to keep their job that long in this country these days, right?" And I was like, and I'm getting paid better. I was like, I started a YouTube channel, so I'm trying to work social media a little bit. I was like, I started getting into building guns, and he looked at me and he's like, "Really?" I didn't think he'd be interested. He's like, "Do you have any you can show me?" I was like, "Yeah, come on over." So I took him into my room, and I was like, "Yeah, I built this rifle, and I restored this one, and I built this, this is an AR pistol, and all this other shit." And he's fascinated, and my mom is fucking livid. She does not like it. So it was like we go through like my revolvers, my pistols, my ARs. Um, I think I had one milsurp at the time that I was actually trying to repair. This is before I was restoring them, and
Hmm.
he found it fascinating. He's like, "Can you build me one?" And I said, "Sure." I was like, "I'll give you a parts list and where to get them, and just bring me the parts, and I'll put it together for you." And like he was pretty happy. My mom rushes him out of my room. She's like, "Come on, come on, come on. We don't want to talk about that." And then for like the next 10 minutes, there was silence in the living room because I guess she was waiting for him to talk about his kids. And they weren't saying a damn thing because they had already been out of college and they don't have a job. And they're still living in his house that he
Wait,
refinanced
so she was expecting him to like talk about their kids? That's
about his kids, but he didn't have anything useful to tell her. So, like, we had an awkward Christmas and then they left and then they've never come back since because she can't compare me to them anymore because she thought they were better for some reason. But see, that's the thing I was talking about earlier. I was like, if your mom and my mom got together, they would probably do that. They would probably get together and just start talking shit about us, about how miserable and how horrible kids we are or were. And
eh.
I would sit there and just look at mine, and you'd probably sit there and look at yours and go, one of these days I'm going to put you in the deepest, darkest hole of the most abusive old people's home I can imagine and get back at you for this. I won't, because if I did, I would have done it already. But, nah, it's just that's what we're stuck with. Judgmental dragon ladies. All my friends called my mom the dragon lady growing up. If your mom lived here in the States, your friends probably would have called yours the same thing. Unless you have one of those cool moms that all just want to meet your friends and cook stuff all the time, then I have to hate you too. So anyway, yeah. So since the last time I really got to talk to you, you make it to bullets. I've been making to rifles,
Nice.
like old rifles, lots of old rifles.
So like, what do you mean make? What do you mean by
Um,
make? Like you buy like rusty guns and like restore them, or like I don't know.
some of them, yes. My first two actually I did make. I went to. I've gotten into doing estate auctions with a couple friends, and then
Mm-hmm.
we sort of buy out the estates. We sort out what's in there, try to gauge what it's worth, sell the things we don't want, and keep what we do. And I went to
Mm-hmm.
this one place where the guy was a pretty well-known hunting rifle builder. Like he made custom hunting rifles, and he had these boxes of parts. So I was going through them, and I found like a half completed stock that he was making, and I found a receiver for a Springfield 1903A3 that already had a Criterion barrel screwed into it, but it was unfinished. And then I just found various little like disconnectors and springs and screws and things like that. So I started sorting it all out, and then I had to buy the parts that I was missing. And in about 2 weeks of really kind of just staring at it and figuring, what I had a working Springfield 1903 A3. It's a sporter rifle because, it's not the original barrel, and I had so few original parts that I couldn't build a legit one because I didn't have the original barrel, so I didn't need the original stock because I didn't have it. So I built a sporter out of it. I finished the stock that he had, and I bought the small parts like the trigger guard, the magazine, the spring and the follower, the ejector, the extractor, stuff like that. And I reassembled it, and I refinished the wood, and I put it all together and put a scope on it, and I did a whole video on it. And I had fun doing it, so I created a YouTube series called This Old Gat, which I do on my channel. It's in one of my playlists.
Mhm.
And then with some of the other parts that he had, uh, again, I found a Winchester receiver with I think it was a Criterion barrel. It might not be, but it had a custom barrel that was screwed into that one, and all I had for that was again like half of a stock. That was like it was like he roughed it out, and I had to finish shaping it, and then a barrel, a receiver, and half of a bolt. And from the serial number on the receiver, I was able to determine that it was a 1961 manufactured Winchester Model 70. And the barrel told me that it was in 264 Winchester Magnum, which is it's like a it's like a 375 Holland and Holland belted Magnum case, but it's
Mhm.
necked down to 6.5. So I thought, wow, that's got to be pretty powerful in terms of trajectory and flat shooting and distance. So I started looking for the parts for that. Ended up buying the wrong magazine because I had discovered that there's a pre 64 model Winchester and a post 64. And
Ah,
the advantage of the post 64 is that you can do a box magazine conversion on those models. But mine was the pre 64, which apparently is really popular with hunting rifle builders. And I found a guy, I think it was in Tennessee, and he had the box magazine that goes into the stock. He had the correct one. I bought the post, and he had the pre. So I bought that, and I was able to put that together. And I did that one in like a red mahogany stain. It turned out really good. So I built that one from just boxes of parts. And then after that, like you were saying, I started doing like restos. So I bought a Swiss 1889 straight pull, like the full
mhm.
length 54-inch rifle. Bought that. The guy had three of them. One of them was mint. He wanted 800 for it. One of them was pretty good, and he wanted like 500 for that. And then there's the one I bought. So it had a good barrel, good bore, good receiver, decent bolt that just needed to be cleaned, and it had a stock where the pores had opened up and water got in it and mold was blooming in the holes of the stock. So it had spots all down the stock. So I ended up buying that one for only 300 bucks because nobody wanted to touch it. And when I got it, I took it apart and stripped the stock. I did what's called a sympathetic restoration. I didn't strip the finish off. I just stripped like the top coat to get to the wood underneath and got all the mold out of it and then resealed
Mhm.
it with tung oil, put it back together. The mold stained the wood. There's still spots, but they're not mold anymore. It's just discoloration. And because I liked the shade of the wood, the color that it had, I could have made the spots disappear with a darker stain, but that gun never came with that dark of a stock, so I didn't do it. I just left it the way it
So
was.
so you're saying that you remove the finish and then
I removed the
uh
top coat. The color and the stain stayed behind. But like the top of the finish kind of turns into like a hard shell. And what I did
like
was I hit it with
I see.
denatured
Hmm.
alcohol and steel wool
Hmm.
to sort of
Hmm.
like scuff off the top layer. And then that opened up the pores of the wood so I can get all the mold out of it. And then once I got that out of it, then I hit it with 800 grit sandpaper just to kind of make it uniform. I was more like
Hmm.
just polishing what was already there, and then I hit it with tung oil to seal it. And it turned out pretty good. Like the spots are still there, but I can live with it because the rest of it came out really good, and it's got that original light kind of beechwood color to it. So I left it alone. So I did
And
that one.
people would buy like old like Russian rifles like completely drenched in fucking cosmoline, and like people wouldn't buy a rifle because it has some mold on it.
Yeah, pretty much. Because the guy had two other ones for sale. So the guy was like, somebody looked at the three rifles and thought, well, it's not worth that much extra work to save 200 bucks. Like somebody was just, I'll buy the other one. Whereas I was looking at it going, I've got tools and I'm not afraid to use them. So I restored it and I got a sweet deal because everything else mechanically on the gun was perfect. Bore was perfect. It was like a mirror in there. The rifling was perfect. I was like, wow, 150-year-old gun. You would never tell by looking down the barrel. So I'm cool with it. The only thing I replaced mechanically on that gun was the original rubbery red bolt handles were kind of just chewy and old and dingy.
Yeah.
So I took them off and I found a guy who makes reproduction Bakelite ones. So now I've got gray bolt handle knobs on it. But what I'd really like to do is get the polished metal ones from the K31 and put those on there because I like the look of the K31's bolt handle. But I did that one, and then I went nuts over like the next 10 months or so. I bought a 1891 Argentinian Mauser. That got me into Mausers. And then I bought a 6.5 Carcano 9124 Troop Special, which actually, after I did the research on it, it served in both World Wars and the police service. So I got a pretty cool one. Then I bought. I'm trying to think of the ones that aren't sitting in front of me right now because I've got like a whole room full of other ones. I bought a 1898 Krag Jorgensen because I always wanted one. That one was a sporter though, but because it was a sporter, I got it for $330. Whereas my local and a lot of other guys in my area, they've got the most clapped out, dingy, fucked up, stocked originals, and they want 850 for it. And I was like, you can kiss my ass. So the one I bought was a 1951 Sporter. Like the guy bought the stock, and I found a listing for it in a catalog from 1951. So it's like it's a really cool 1950s period stock. It's really nice looking actually, and it's got like a obsidian diamond inlaid in the semi pistol grip, which I thought was kind of cool. So like the barrel appears to be a carbine barrel. I thought it was cut down, but the more I looked into it, it's a legit carbine barrel. Um, but the stock is so nice, I don't want to switch it out. Like if I could find a Krag carbine stock, I could restore this. But I really like this stock, so I'm just going to keep it the way it is. I'll just buy another Krag if I want a legit one. So I got that. Um, then I bought the Vetterli Vitali, full length Vetterli Vitali, which I tried to get at Wanamaker 4 years ago, but balked out on. So I bought that. And that one I got from Ancestry Armament or something like that. They're like a museum slash reseller. And I think I got that one for like 400. I'm pretty happy. Like I paid a little more than I should have, but it's nice. And then after I got that one, I geeked out over the magazine so much that I turned around and I bought its companion piece. So I bought the Dutch Beaumont Vitali right afterwards, and I really overpaid for that, which I thought I did. I thought I overpaid for it. But then after I restored it, I had it appraised, and it's appraised for more than 2.5 times what I paid for it. So I thought, okay, it's in good shape. I don't feel so bad now. And then I got into, I call it the Jap Mauser,
Mm-hmm.
but I bought a Type 38 Arasaka, and I always try to buy the interesting ones. So like, I like the Type 38 because I like the safety, that big knurled knob on the back that you can use your palm of your hand to turn. So I
Mm-hmm.
got that. But what makes this one doubly interesting is this specific rifle, and I'm going to try to get a handwritten certificate to prove it. This specific rifle with this serial number is the instructor's rifle at the Kokura Arsenal School in Tokyo. So it's not like it was a battle rifle, but it was taken out of service. They didn't scratch the mum. They embossed moons into the end of every petal of the mum, and then uh, they put a kanji on the top of the receiver where it says 38 type. Above it, it says uh, school. There's a kanji for school on the
Oh,
top of
I
it,
see.
and then on the side of the receiver, it has another kanji that says sensei. And I thought, oh, so not only did I get the Arsenal's school rifle, I got the teacher's rifle that he took apart to teach armorers how to take apart and restore or repair the guns. So that was cool. I bought that. I think I paid like I think I paid 400 for that one after shipping. But what was cool is I think the reason I got it as cheap as I did was because a lot of the school rifles, if it was a marksmanry school, they used a casted receiver, like a pot metal receiver,
Mm-hmm.
because it was only intended to fire blanks. So if you got a school rifle that was for marksmanry school, or for, yeah, marksmanry school basically, uh, you got the pot metal receiver.
Well,
People used to buy those.
it's as far as I know, like it's not just a receiver. Like even the barrel isn't rifled, so like you
It's
can
not
just look
rifled.
down on the
Yeah,
barrel
exactly. That's
and
the
like
other thing.
see like it's a pop metal. It's a pop metal rifle.
Right. It didn't have rifling, and it didn't have a original receiver. People would buy those and put real ammo in there and shoot them and blow them up. So I think they have a lot of negative connotation with them.
Mm-hmm.
If you got an Arsenal school rifle, they took a good condition rifle and took it out of service, so the teacher and the students would have good rifles to take apart. So that's the one I got, and it does have a legitimate receiver because I've already shot this thing. Like it didn't blow up, and I know it's not pot metal, and it's got rifling, really good rifling. The only thing that was wrong with this rifle that I got was it has one hell of a rack dent on the side of the handguard, which you could tell it's been there forever because like the finish follows it. There's no cracking or anything or scratches
Mm-hmm.
done to it. So that's the only problem with that one. And it's got a rack mark painted, like a number painted on the stock, so I left it on there. Other than that, it's fine. Like I didn't have to. I don't think I had to boil anything on that Arasaka. I took it
So
apart.
like why do all these Arasakas have their like mumsy face? Like is it because like they wanted to get rid of like the emperor or something? I don't know.
No, so when a rifle is taken out of service, it is no
Mm-hmm.
longer in service to the emperor. So the markings are taken
Ah,
off.
so the Japs did it like
Yes.
in Japan, like
Yeah.
after the war.
Yeah, we didn't do it. They did it.
Okay, okay.
When it's taken out of service, if it's completely taken out of service, it's completely defaced off. If it's going to a school, then either there's two things that it can do. One, they emboss moons on the like full moons on the end of the mum.
Hmm.
Somebody told me that they do that to the arsenal ones, and the marksmanry ones they completely grind off the mum and they put like a double concentric circle on it instead. But I've seen regular shootable rifles with that too, so I don't think that really plays out. But yeah, the ones that they take to schools, double rings or full moons around the petals of the mum. But the ones that are completely taken out, they just grind off, or they strike it out. Some of them like you'll have like 5 or 6 slash marks through it. Some of them they'll like scratch an X through it. Some of them they just grind it completely off. But anyway, got that one, and then right after I got that, I finally found a Lebel, or no, a Berthier rifle because I always wanted a Berthier, and I finally found one that was within my budget because they typically sell for ridiculous amounts of money. So I got a French 0715 Berthier 5-shot. But this one had 4 inches of the barrel cut off and about 14 inches of the stock cut off. So what I got to do to this one, I'm going to build what I call a resto mod rifle because I can't restore it. The barrel's not the right length. It's something between a carbine and a full-length rifle. It's missing its front sight, and it's missing almost the whole front third of its stock. It was sporter cut. So I've got plans for that. Scott must be at his air thing.
Yep.
So anyway, um, I've got plans for that. It's just I'm acquiring parts to do this one because what I intend to do is this rifle was originally built without an upper handguard. So it has the barrel band of a rifle without an upper handguard. What I want to do is because I still have the rear sight, I want to put a rifle length handguard, upper handguard on it, and then replace the barrel band with one for a rifle with an upper handguard. And then I'm going to build a filler piece on the end of the stock and attach it, you know, threaded rods and acroglass. But it's going to have like a hunting rifle's white line spacer between the original stock and my piece. Because my piece is going to be made out of white poplar. I want it to be really white. And then I'm going to put 2 pie cuts in it. And I'm going to stain the back third closest to the shooter in Minwax Ocean Blue, translucent stain, like Gibson Les Pauls are stained in. I'm going to leave the
Hmm.
center white, just urethane sealed. And I'm going to do the front in, I forgot the color they call it, but it's a translucent red. So it's going to be like the colors of the French flag on that part of the stock. And I'm going to cap it off with the original rifle um, barrel band with the bayonet lug and the stacking rod. So I'll have to inlet that into the piece I'm making. So it's going to have the fixtures of the original rifle, but it's going to be the wrong length, and it's going to, you know, have that colored section on the end of it because I can't restore it. And then for a front sight, I haven't decided if I'm going to try my hand at finding one and brazing it on there, or the other idea that I had that I was telling Scott about because he's got a similar rifle with a missing piece on the front of it, is I'm thinking about grafting on and blind pinning the front sight with the barrel trumpet from a British jungle carbine because one of the other rifles I bought was a British jungle carbine, and I've got that front sight with the trumpet on the end. And I thought, well, I could put that on the end of this rifle because it's not the trumpet thing is not rifled. It's obviously much bigger than the bore. So it would just be stuck on the end of it, and I'll blind pin it in place, and that gives me a front sight. The only difference is I have to machine down the front sight of the one I'm putting on there because it's much taller than the British rifle had. I've only got 10 millimeters from the top of the barrel to the top of the peak of a front sight for a Berthier to work with. So I'll have to like machine it down and then like cold blue it and then put it on the end of a French rifle. I think it'll look cool too, actually. I haven't decided yet because the barrel's blued, So if I put that on there, it'll all be uniform in color. And it'll be an amalgam anyway, because it's not original. Like, I'm just trying to keep it running. The barrel that's on it's good. The rifling is good. There's no pitting in it, so that's cool. The magazine's good. The spring's good. The bolt's good. Trigger's good. What's left of the stock is restorable. What I'll probably do to this one is I will take the majority of the finish off of this because it's too dark for my taste, and then I'll re-hit it with Dutch or Danish oil. So I got that, and then after I bought that, I bought another Mauser. I bought a Turkish '05, or sorry, I bought an '88 '05 35 Turkish Mauser. And again, it's like I picked something interesting. So this rifle was a Gewehr 88 commission rifle that got the '05 modification, and then it was given to the Turks, and then the Turks ran it until 1935, and then did an Arsenal refurb on it because they wanted to keep the rifles in circulation to run alongside their Car 98s. So what they did was they took the 88 barrel off and they put a Car 98K barrel on it. And then they modified the magazine so it doesn't need end block clips anymore. You could just use Car 98 stripper clips now. And it's got a 323 barrel. God, that's really loud, dude.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so it's like an 88 from the trigger back, but it's a 98 from the trigger forward. Hang on, I'll deal with that.
So cute.
I will deal with this. There.
Guys, boys.
So yeah, that has been dealt with. There. So anyway, there's that. Ooh, I have a Night Strike. I don't blame you for any of your rifle purchases. I like the rifles you chose, actually. Oh, wait. So this is the part where people are going to hate me. So then, after I bought the Turkish Mauser,
Mhm.
I made a friend with a dude who had moved here from Syria years ago, like decades ago. He's much older than I am. And he found out that I'm into firearms. He does the estate thing too. That's how I met him.
Mhm.
And he said, I would very much like to own, this is what he called it. I would very much like to own a Western rifle. And I'm like, what do you mean Western? And he goes like, like the riflemen, Westerns. And I said, oh,
Oh.
okay. And I'm like, so what you want is called a lever action rifle? And he goes, that. And so he asked me, I don't blame you for the SMLE. I bought that too, yes. Actually, I have to thank you for finding that one. I still have to replace the upper handguard on that, but that'll come later once I gain the courage to take off the copper wire. So anyway, he asked me to check out this rifle that he was interested in buying. It was I think it was an 1892 Winchester. I think it was a 92. I can't remember the actual number. I think it was a 92 Winchester. It was in a display case at the antique center that my other friend works at, so it was easy to find. And it had a $3,300 price tag. And the guy was like, this has a certificate of authenticity from the Cody Firearms Museum. And he goes, is that legit? And I said, yeah, I know the Cody Firearms Museum. And then he goes, yes, I have been complaining about the handguard forever. Because I haven't had the guts to replace it yet. I don't know if I want to, or if I need to, or if I'm going to, or if I'm going to send it to Mark to do it. So anyway, where was I? Oh, so yeah, certificate of authenticity from the Cody Firearms Museum. And I looked at the rifle and I'm like, he wants $3,300 for this. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, there's no provenance. It's just an old rifle with the certificate of authenticity. He goes, yes. And I said, and the magazine tube is not original. And he's like, how do you know that? And I said, well, look at the whole gun. It's just a giant pile of oiled down rust. And then look at the magazine tube. It's blued like it was put on yesterday. I'm like, this gun is not all original. And I said, a guy like me is going to take this gun, take it apart, boil all the steel or metal on it in a boiling vessel, card it, rust blue it, put it back together, and hope it all goes back together the way it came apart. You know, maybe try to preserve the stock, see if there's any mold or mung or oil soak, and get all that out of it. And then put it back together and give it to you. And then we're still going to have to inspect the bore and make sure that it's going to be shootable. And I'm like, the guy that I would send it to has a 2-year backlog and probably charge you another like $2,000 to do it. So now you have a $5,300 rifle that may or may not shoot. And he was like, so don't buy it. I'm like, no. I said, if I were to buy that rifle personally, regardless of what you think it's worth, to me, it's not even worth $1,000. And then if I had to fix it, I would charge you $1,000 to do the resto work on it. So you're still in the $2,000.
Mhm. So he saw an old rifle with a certificate and like just
No, he wants to buy
thought
them.
it was like expensive.
He wants to buy it.
Mm.
And I was like, this is the problem you're going to run to with a lot of old rifles like this. They have heritage because they're old, but like Jesse James didn't shoot this, you know? It's like there's nothing but the fact that it's an old rifle and it's got a certificate saying yes, it's an old rifle. There's value in that. Is there $3,300 worth of value in that? Not to me. Especially since you got to throw $2,000 of restoration work at it. And then you still end up with a rifle that's maybe only worth the asking price. I was like, if you want something that hangs on the wall, that works like a lever action, that you can actually go out and shoot and enjoy from time to time, I've got a rifle I'll sell you. And he goes, oh, do you? So I sold him my Marlin 336. And I only sold it to him for $800. And the reason it's $800 is because number one, shortage. Number two, it's a 1977 pre-Freedom Group Marlin 336. And it's blued. It's not Parkerized. The whole thing was blued. Beautifully blued. And it's got the original sights on it with the brass bead sight hooded. It's got the upgraded gold trigger with the happy trigger kit in it, because I put that in there. And the walnut stock is mint. And then I put a receiver rail on it and a reflex sight in case he wanted to use it just for fun. And I said, you can always just take this off by taking these 2 screws off. This pops off, you can use the original sights. So he bought it. $800. And with that $800, I turned around and I bought a 1944 Tula Arsenal Mosin Nagant PU sniper with the correct scope on it. And I got it for $800. So
I don't know how much those are worth. Like, are they worth like a lot more?
in the condition that this one is in, I bought it. I took it straight to collectors, and I'm like, what would you give me for this? The guy looked at it. He grabbed his dial calipers, and he measured the rear sight, or the scope, because that's the first way you could tell if you have a fake. So he measured the rear scope, the rear of the scope, rather.
Mhm.
Then he checked the front sight. Then he checked the bolt. Then he took the butt plate off, and he checked the numbers on it and everything, and he goes, I'll give you $3,000 for this. I'm like, no, you won't. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I just bought it. And he's like, can I ask you what you paid for it? And I'm like, $800. And the guy just gave me this look like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And he goes, well, enjoy it. He just slid it back over to me, and I took it home. So I got that. The only thing that rifle really needs is there are 3 scratches on the handguard that went through the finish. There are surface scratches, though. They're not like gouged into the wood. It's almost like someone took a potato peeler and just skinned the top of it. But I found this stuff that what it does is you dab it on the surrounding finish, and it loosens the finish to let you kind of melt it across the scratch. And then you leave it alone and let it cure for a day, and then it resets itself. So it's sort of like taking paint thinner to a scratch in paint and dabbing it on there and letting it kind of bleed over the scratch, and then you just buff it out. So I'm going to try that first, and if that works, job done. If it doesn't work, then what I'll probably have to do is take that piece of the handguard off, and then I'll do the steel wool thing to feather the edges, and then I'll try to find a period correct type oil, and I'll just refinish that part. But other than that, I mean, the scope's good, the glass is clear, it's the correct scope to the gun, it's serialized. But the thing about PU snipers is that the scopes aren't serialized to the gun, so it's never going to match. But on a PU sniper, there are 5 or 6 pieces of the gun that have serial numbers, and they have to match. And the thing is some of those parts aren't serialized on infantry rifles. So the good thing is if you think you have a PU sniper, there's a really good video from a couple years back on YouTube to um, how to figure out or how to identify if you have
Infantry
a
or
real
not.
one or not. Right, if you have an
Mhm.
infantry one or not. The other dead giveaway is the front sight. So on an infantry rifle, the front sight on a Mosin Nagant is typically drifted to I think the left a little bit from center,
Mhm.
and it's noticeable. Like if you put your finger on that sight and run down the dovetail, you'll feel it being proud on one side. That's how far over it's drifted, because the original infantry rifle was sighted with the bayonet attached, and the bayonet was off to one side, and it would cause the bullet to yaw to one side. So they had to adjust the front sight to compensate for that. There's a really cool story about how the Russians gave Nagant rifles, I think, to the Bulgarians, and the Bulgarians thought they were garbage. They were like, these guns are shitty. I can't hit the broadside of a barn. Because they gave them the rifles, but they didn't give them the bayonets. And they didn't tell them that the bayonets were attached to the rifles when they were sighted in. So when they got the rifles without the bayonets, they tried to shoot them, and they were like, these things are inaccurate as hell. And then the Russians were like, oh, yeah, by the way. And then they drifted the sight over, and everything was fine. So anyway, the ones on a PU sniper are not only dead center, but they're slightly taller too than an infantry rifle sight. The post.
How good is like fucking 80-year-old glass? I have no idea.
Well, if it's not been exposed to moisture
Hmm.
and it's not been exposed to like, well, I guess just humidity in general, um, it's just as good as the day that it was made. So, like for instance, this one here, it had the original leather caps still attached, and the whole thing was still wrapped in wax paper. And then the windage and elevation knobs are still wrapped in wax paper, and it has a string that ties it together. I haven't taken those off yet. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to take them off. I might, because I bought it
You,
to
you,
shoot
think,
it.
you think it'll be worth more if you like don't take off that wax paper? I
I
guess.
honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm not really an appraiser, so I can't
Mhm.
say. But what I can say is I got a really cool rifle that I never thought I would own. I paid a lot less than it's worth. It's in very good shape, and I bought it to shoot it. So chances are I'm going to take the covers off. But what I'll do is I'll gingerly just wiggle them off. I'm not going to like rip it off of there. Like if I could try to get those little windage and elevation paper things off and just like wiggle them off so I can push them back on later, I'll do that. I'll
Mhm.
keep them. But if they come apart, then they're going in the garbage. I don't give a shit. I bought the gun to shoot it. So I got that. Loving it. And right now, the thing I'm working on currently acquiring is I want a Swedish Mauser.
Mhm.
I have a line on a Swedish Mauser carbine. So far, I found the stock and a couple of the barrel bands, but I'm looking for the receiver. I found the trigger too. I'm looking for the receiver and the barrel. I don't know where it is yet, but if I find it, then I'll put that together. If not, then I'll probably just buy one already put together. I'd like to have a 9414 carbine, but they're pretty expensive. There was two at my local, but the guy wanted over 1,000 for them. Swedish Mausers typically in my area sell for anywhere between 6 to 700. Scott says up in his area they're more expensive. So there's that. The other thing I'd like to have is a Car 88 carbine or a Car 91, which is basically the same thing. Um, I'd like to have a Fruith carbine, but they're almost non-existent here in the States. I'd like to get that I'd like to get that 1893 Monlicker, the one that Othias did an video on last week.
Hmm.
Really would
Hmm.
like to have one of those. And for something a touch of modern, I want to buy a Daewoo K2, but I want to buy the one called they brought them in the States. They're called the DR300, which
Yeah,
is
like they brought them in like different versions, like
yeah,
the ones before the assault rifle ban, like it's normal, but
yes.
like after, like they have these thumb
So
hole
they got
stocks and stuff
yeah,
like that.
they got the DR200 is the thumbhole stock in 5.56.
Hmm.
The one I want is the DR300, which is in 7.62 by 39. And the only reason I want that one is because if you look at a Daewoo like K2 with the
Hmm.
handguard on it and the way that the gas system looks, it reminds me of a Galil in a way. So I'm like, yeah, I want that, but I want it in a Galil caliber, 7.62 caliber, because my intention is the plastic stock with the thumb hole thing's going to come off. And I found a company that makes an adapter so I could put a like Magpul type grip on it if I want,
Hmm.
and I could put a foldy boy on the back, and I can use an AR buffer tube, so I have stock options. So what I'd like to do is, since I'm going to get one that looks sort of what reminds me of a Galil, I'll put the foldy boy on it with a skeleton stock, the with the double tubes and the foam thing across the top one. Um,
Uh,
because it comes with the AR buffer tube that the skeleton stock slips over anyway. So it's going to have like a double tube skeleton stock with a rubber pad on the back and like a foam thing across the top tube. That's a foldy boy. So it'll look a lot like a Galil. At least in my eyes, it will. And when they first came here, they were like $600. The cheapest one I found was like 1,600. I'm like, I'm gonna just keep looking until I find one because I'm pretty sure if I bide my time, I'll get one for what I want to pay for it. Yes, I do want a K2 to stand on a rooftop. That is true. But yeah, if I get the DR300, I'll be pretty happy for something modern. And I still want the Keltec P50. I'm still waiting to see what kind of braces will come out for it, if any,
because
now.
the like the weird like 5.7
Yeah.
FN thing that they're making.
Yeah. I really like it because it's like the overall length of it's like 11 inches, so it's pretty
Hmm.
long. And then you put a brace on it, and then I was thinking about putting like I'll probably put something similar to like an EOTech on the top of it, or maybe like a Hollow Sun 507 or something on the top of it. But I think that would be pretty cool. That's like the only modern gun that came out this year that I do want. Nothing else really came out this year that caught my attention aside from the Anaconda. And then that's kind of it. Like after, I didn't think I was going to buy anything this year, and I bought like 5 grand worth of milserves. So it's kind of where I'm at. Anyway, I gotta go make my folks some lunch. They're getting hungry. I think what I'll
Okay.
probably do is because I do this regularly every week now, is I'm gonna start playing this, which I know you can't hear, but the viewers can. And everybody
Hmm.
already figured out what game this came from. I've been doing intros and outros with video game soundtracks. So for those who last week who said this came from The Legend of Zelda, you're correct. It is. It's from Ocarina of Time. No, the third one, whatever the third one was, the Super Nintendo one. I love this intro or this outro. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching. Coming up next
Yay, you're a
later
YouTuber
today.
now.
Yeah, coming up next later this week or later today is my last 30 on the Long Dark. And Monday we will start off with the early watch. And then if you want to join my lobby, you're free to do so. You can come in here, use the email address at the bottom. I will send you a link. You can join anytime you want. and be a part of this. We have our discussions. Yeah, link to the past. That's it. Correct. You can join my lobbies every day, Monday through Friday, or you can be part of this panel on Saturdays using the email address below at the bottom right. I know I forgot to put it in the description. I will do that immediately after I finish this video, so wait a couple of minutes and I will modify the description of the video. You can just cut and paste it because I know it's really long and really annoying, but it's part of a joke, as is most of the content that I put on my channel anyway. So thank you for watching, and we will see you either Monday on the lobby or next Saturday here.